welcome back to another amazing, exciting episode of the Arcane Archive presents MetaTalks. And we have quite the amazing MetaTalk topic that we're going to be talking about today, as we always do. Samuel, would you like to tell our audience what we're MetaTalk talking about?
Yeah, we're MetaTalk talking about the newcomers, the new ones to your table, the people who have read their, a couple posts about D&D and are like,
maybe they saw
that sounds interesting.
A couple episodes of Critical Role. They saw the D&D movie. They seen the game Baldur's Gate 3 that just recently came out, and they're interested in maybe finding the roots of all of this stuff and wanting to get involved with, the OG, the real gem of this whole amazing kind of hobby and world that has been spreading like wildfire the last couple of years. So yeah, this video is specifically going to be about beginnings for all you newbie GMs, players, and stuff. And me and Sam are kind of just going to go over a little bit of maybe some advice, some tips, some tricks here or there about, some things that maybe might be helpful for you getting into the hobby. Certainly I think a couple of things that I think I would have loved to have known when I first started out that would have made, I think, a lot of things a bit easier and a bit more convenient and smooth in my introduction to this amazing hobby and game. So yeah, you know what? Let's go ahead and dive right on in to start. For me, honestly, one thing that I specifically did kind of want to talk about is for people initially trying to find, D&D games and groups. I think that in and of itself is probably, for most people, going to be one of the hardest things to even get into the game in the first place, is finding a suitable, and emphasis on the suitable, group, friends, party, all of that stuff. And there are a multitude of ways that you can go about doing this. Obviously, it also is very dependent on kind of where you live and where you are, because there are certain areas like cities, towns, whatever, that have if you're wanting to play a type of game that's in person, for instance, obviously the first way to go for that is if you have friends, if you have a pretty cool, close-knit group of friends who maybe they've never really thought about it before. Maybe you're the only one who's interested, but I would highly suggest just, ask them. Go ahead and see, because you never know. One of the biggest things that me and Sam, when I first met Sam, one of the biggest things that we connected on that I was completely surprised on was the fact that we both loved D&D. I literally just asked Sam, do you remember that, Sam, when we were at work? We were working.
Yeah, you mentioned I think I was we were kind of sitting near the bar, and you mentioned having a game or something, and I was like, oh. And you're like, what? And I'm like, yeah.
No, you're like, that's that thing. I'm like, oh, I love that. Yeah, and
I've been playing for 4 years.
I was like, yes, that's amazing. So you just never know. Again, I would highly suggest, advise, even plead, if you have this interest and you're really trying, don't be afraid to ask people about it. Don't be afraid to ask your friends or whoever, because you never know who might have a bit of an interest, or who maybe even has some experience themselves. Barring that, of course, if you don't, from some unfortunate kind of circumstance, if you don't have any friends who are willing to play with you, or maybe you just don't have any friends at all in real life, that's okay. There are also multiple ways for you to still find a group. Another one being, again, if you're still looking for specifically in-person play, great resources in place would be any game shops that you know of.
Yeah, game shops are always running stuff.
They're great places to at least go, and if nothing else, you will still find like-minded people there, even if game shops themselves might not be running any campaigns or events. You might, it's a great source and a great location to meet other like-minded people who might be interested, who you could ask, and maybe they could invite you to a game. A good place for GMs to find players is a great location for that. Other than that, of course, obviously, if you're not really able to get much play from either your friends or from the local gaming shops or locations, you're probably going to have to go with doing an online game, and that's still great, honestly. I've done both. Sam has as well, I believe, where we've played both in person and online. Both are great. They're amazing experiences either way. I mean, obviously there might be certain benefits and negatives, you know, to but either one specifically, but they are in no way, shape, or form like, you know, less amazing or less of an experience than the other. One great way, honestly, and they're for online games, there are probably even more multitude of resources that you can use to find groups online, as is kind of the point of the internet and nowadays anyway. One of those particular resources, again, a great one, pretty easy, is if you use D&D Beyond. They literally have a chat forum page right there that you can literally post to either find a group. You can just look at posts to find a group. Again, like you can make your own to find. Like I've been doing that like recently as well, like in trying to find other games, and I have recently. Like I've joined a multitude of games now just from using this alone, and that doesn't even include like a lot of other specific websites that like are dedicated to finding like tabletop games. Like all manner of, so honestly, just typing it in should give you up all manner of like great tools and resources to help you find like threads. If you're part of certain Discord groups, is another great tool and resource to find people and groups and players to join together. And so they're again, that particular aspect over the internet is probably far easier to find people, and once again, it is no less like satisfying or thrilling or fun to play like online than in person. It's just there might be certain nuances that might be slightly different, but other than that, like it's still great. That being the case, once you have found your tool, your resource that you're going to use to try and find a party and a group, at that point, I think it is important to keep in mind. We've said it before on this show. Many countless others have said it countless times before, and it still rings true. I'm still not entirely sure where this kind of came from. I really want to know, but the ancient, magic adage of no D&D is better than bad D&D. You know what I mean? Like this is something that you should, and I know it's going to be hard, especially probably for new players who have never done it before. But this is a mantra that you should keep in your mind as best as you can. And that, as with almost anything in the world, especially with something like this, where you are going to have so many people wanting to play, right? There are countless people who love this game or this hobby, who are passionate about it. Us being a great example of that, who want to get into it, who want to play it, who want to have a great time with it. That also will then include people who you might not really jive with, even though you all have the interest and the desire to play this game together. That doesn't necessarily mean that you will be compatible with one another and the type of game that you want to play and how, you have fun. And so I know, and it's probably not really gonna be applicable for people who are brand new. And I certainly also don't want to, on the other hand, frighten anybody from trying and from looking. But it is always very important. It's just important for me to tell you and let you know that you need to find the right group for you. Any group won't necessarily do, or at least it shouldn't, because it runs the risk of potentially shattering your passion and interest in this hobby and game. And we don't want that. We love new people. We want everyone and new people to come in to enjoy the game, to have a great time, to make friends and memories from this thing, because it's great. It has the capacity to provide such amazing memories and experiences for people. It can help exponentially, and in my opinion, anyway. And I think Sam would probably agree.
Yeah, I mean, it can be something that you do for a long time. You meet people who you stay friends with. The whole bad D&D is better or is worse than no D&D is, I mean, it is something to look at in this way, especially if you're a newer player. I've tried to get people in D&D, some successfully, some not. The concept and what people see of like media D&D versus probably what's going to happen at your table are two very different things. I wanted to play D&D because of Critical Role. My dad was the one who showed me the show. I didn't even know it was a show. He showed it to me as a podcast. I loved it. The thing is that he played it when he was a kid. He's like, you like this stuff. I had never played before. Once I started watching them, I started buying books. I tried to find people to play with. I wasn't very successful because I wasn't very social. I got very lucky with the people that I'm with now. The thing is, though, what you see on podcasts and live play sessions is not necessarily what you're going to get. It's not
Not
a bad thing.
always.
It's not a bad thing. And the reality is I think this is especially for things like Critical Role or some of those like longer played podcasts where they've been playing this game for 15 years, all of them. There is something to be said, whether you're a professional voice actor or you've been playing the game for a very long time. Your table will look very
Yeah,
different
I was gonna
than
say.
that, and don't expect that. Now you can have aspirations to one day
Get to that kind of
be
point or that
confident in it.
level, because it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, like even if you haven't, like, again, it is true that the people on Critical Role, like, there were a number of them that had never played before when they first like started like streaming it. But like
they'd
Sam
all played
said,
a little bit, right? Because they played
they
before they
they
started streaming.
their campaign was like the first one for a lot of them, but they were
Mhm.
like, I think, what, level 5 by the time that we saw them officially. Were they even higher? 10?
Higher
Were they
level
level?
8,
They were level
8 or
8 or
9.
8 or 9 when they first started in the Underdark, or when we saw them. Okay, or at the Dwarven City or whatever. But yeah, like so even that, like, most likely they had been playing for like maybe a couple months then at that point
Yeah.
before
Now
they
they
had
had
actually
converted.
like,
They had converted from Pathfinder to
yeah, from
5e, so there was a
Pathfinder
little
to
bit
5.
of
So
a.
there was a, yeah,
You'll notice it's a
there
little
was,
rough at the beginning. There's things they're
yeah.
confused about. There's things they don't quite know how they work. Matt is very good about guiding them.
And that is another thing too, like, because Matt, as well as I believe Taliesin, Liam, were like all very familiar and
They definitely
you
did their
know
homework.
experience. Well, they're very familiar and experienced with the game. Like, all
Yeah,
three of them, I believe, have played a multitude before. But I do believe that Sam, Travis, Laura, Marisha, and Ashley were all brand new
all
to the
brand
game.
new,
They
pretty
had never
much.
played before. However, they, of course, like Sam just stated, they still have that aspect because they are voice actors, right? So
It's not just
they
that they were all friends
they're
beforehand,
all friends
which
beforehand, and
is
so
a
they're
huge.
it's a big effect. Like, you have to understand how big of, like, because you're comfortable there, because you feel much more, relaxed, and you're with friends, you can joke around, you can get into character. Like, they had all the right makings to make it look like they had
Professional.
been playing, yeah, well, not just professional, but to make it look ironically unprofessional, right?
Yeah,
More casual, where they were all just friends together who had been doing this for forever, even though they hadn't been, technically speaking. Because that, in essence, like Sam said, it is a great point that he's making, in terms of, like, I've also heard and read a lot of potential, like, stories, tales about people being like, oh, I watched Critical Role and now I want my campaign to be exactly like that.
it's not
Now,
going to be.
probably not. And, and
No,
and especially not right away. Like, if
no.
it ever could get there, like, you need to put in the time and effort that they have. That they didn't just get there. They put in the time and effort for their friendship and their relationships. And they put in the time and effort to their craft, like learning how to, like, to be voice actors, to get into it, not just put in the time. They just have that passion, right? That's
Yeah.
why they're voice actors. They just love that shit.
Well,
They
it's
love pretend. They love
yeah,
just
they're
playing
they're they're
pretend.
unbelievably creative people, and the reality is that we look at D&D as a game. I like to think of it as a collaborative story. We've talked about this before. That's kind of the bread and butter of what this is. Yes, it is a game. Yes, it is a tabletop RPG, role-playing game, whatever you want to classify it as. It is, at the end of the day, a story that you tell as a group, both
With your
DM and
friends.
players. Now, here's the thing. I think people watch people like professional DMs or very good DMs, and they're like, I want my campaign to be like that. So I'm going to emulate that DM. That's fine. Go for it.
Yeah,
What I will
no.
tell you is that if your players at the table do not reciprocate the effort you're putting in, your table is not going to go well. You have to, like, there's something that I'll tell, kind of an anecdote of what happened with me. I found a group purely on accident. I went out with a buddy of mine. We went and got some drinks. It was the middle of summer. It was awesome. We were sitting outside in the sun, getting a little tipsy. It was great. Get a call from one of my buddies. He's like, hey, we're all hanging out in the garage. Come by. I was like, oh, they're probably just going to be hanging out. I get there and they have what is it? The Forbidden Mansion? What's the like the tile game? There's like the Forbidden Island, for like the Forbidden Desert. Basically, it's a big
Oh.
tile game where tiles get placed out, and then you have like a sanity score, stuff like that. It's a board game that takes like 3 hours to play.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
like, I come to this garage, it's like 3 people that I think, yes, you may want to play this game, and the rest of them are just high. So
Yeah,
I'm like, I don't know what's going on here, but I knew a couple people, and I was like, really? Like, this is what you're doing in like the middle of June? It's like 90 degrees outside. He's like, no, we got AC in here. I was like, shit, okay.
Hey, I'm
So
there. I'm there, bro.
I sit down. I'm drinking a little bit, and where they're playing, and he's like, oh, well, you played this before. You want to play? And I was like, well, I've played it before. So if someone wants to play that hasn't played, I'll assist if they have questions. I'll just help them out. Because if they're not sure, I'll help them out. So my buddy starts playing. He's having a good time. And we played for like a couple hours. Game's finished. Whatever. Like they finally do it. It's all tense. Whatever. They don't think they're gonna be successful. And so we're all, we're laughing. We're chilling. And I see a DMG, a Dungeon Master's Guide, on the shelf behind the buddy who was running the game, who was like who owned the game. And I'm like, do you play D&D? He goes, well, no, but we've been looking into trying to play. I got like a couple buddies from work, whatever. I was like, I have books.
Yeah.
He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I got like 4 campaign books, a couple other books. He's like, what do you play? I'm like, never have. I played once like a long time ago with people who didn't know how to play, and we just kind of had fun. He goes, well, what do you want to play? And I was like, well, when are we playing? 2 weeks
Let's
later.
do it.
Yeah, 2 weeks later at 11 o'clock after work on a Sunday at 11 at night, we're playing D&D until 4 in the morning with a group of 8 8 people, including the DM. Too many people.
I was gonna say that's
too many people.
That is probably too much for a first camp, unless the GM is experienced already.
Nope, he's never ran a game.
That's not the ideal. Not that you shouldn't do it. No, but you shouldn't try it.
That's why I'm saying this is no one could pay attention. There was like me and 2 other guys who like actually were paying attention. There was a girl who was there with us who was very quiet, never played before, but wanted to play, who I just was like, all right, I know the rules. You sit over here. And when you have questions, you ask me so you don't get embarrassed by talking, like, because there's people everywhere. Yeah. And within 2 weeks, we had 6 people in a DM. Yeah. And it was actually going.
Yeah. Six is usually almost the sweet spot. Like 5
and now like 5 years later,
yeah, bro,
we're still playing. The thing is that every person at your table is going to get something different out of the game. And that's something that I think we've learned as a group is who likes what parts of the game. There's some of us that role play more heavy. There's some of us that are there for combat. We still role play, but like we want to hit things and roll dice.
Numbers. You want to roll those numbers, see that,
and there's nothing wrong with that. As long as they put some effort into role playing a character.
I mean, I feel like that's the aspect of it overall, right?
But again, these are things you learn. I'm not gonna say I was a good role player when we started. Now, I will say I did put myself out there, even though I was very embarrassed to do so, and it worked out for me.
Yeah.
I get like trust, like when people talk about like I don't know, like the role play thing is weird. I feel weird. Just the first thing I always tell new players when they're a little bit weirded out by the role playing thing is pick a couple things. Think of a character, very basic. Just pick a couple of things. Why are you here? What did you do in your life? It could be extremely basic. When we were playing, like when we played with our coworkers. Yeah. I owned a bar. Like that's great. Okay, what are you gonna do with that? Yeah. Because that's all you need to do. You don't have to play a fully blown written character. Yeah, play yourself. Play yourself with different goals.
I was going to say, like, what could be great is almost like imagine what you would like to maybe do in life. Do you like singing? Do you like dancing? Do you like like chess? Do you like do you like math? Do you like reading? Do you like books? Anything that you yourself, any bits and pieces of yourself that you can kind of insert, because that's at the end of the day, that is what probably almost every D&D character is. It's always going to be a part of you that you are bringing into this game to play. And it's a fantasy too. This is a part of you that you might not maybe be able to express as much as you would like. It's going to be a part of you that maybe, you feel kind of frightened or embarrassed to showcase at other times, or that you feel like, you can't necessarily truly express or live up to maybe in your life at any point. Like either way, any aspect, like Sam said, that you want to do, that helps exponentially to not only get you invested in the game and in your character, but to immerse you. And it provides an avenue of a lot of freedom for you to express yourself in ways that maybe you can't always do so in the real world. Now, obviously, this can also sometimes have negative effects. So certain people who like to express certain parts of themselves that without necessarily the consent, or that might not be conducive to a cooperative environment with people, right? That's also something you obviously have to be aware of. And I'm not necessarily going to say that that is just overtly wrong, because again, that is what the game is for, in a sense, to be able to allow that. But obviously, like Sam said, this is first and foremost always a cooperative storytelling game. Emphasis on the cooperation. Like you have to work with your party, your friends, and everything to make this work. And so in regards to that, another thing to always be aware of is your character needs to have a reason to be with these people, to be with the party, to do this thing. If you if you create a character who's like, a lone wolf, doesn't play well with others, there's nothing wrong with that initially necessarily. But you need to understand that if you make that kind of character, then you have to make them with the understanding that that will change.
Yeah.
That they will begin to evolve or shift to being more cooperative, that they will like maybe learn the value of cooperation and friendship and relationship, all that stuff.
And it's so fun to make characters that change. I think people
I agree
who haven't done this before, and people who are looking to play these kinds of games, it is fine to come to a table with a cooperative, lovely character. Someone who's positive, someone who loves everybody and wants to get along. If you're me, you did it once, you were murdered by mind flayers, you're never going to do it again. So
I'll get him to do it, you guys. Don't worry.
So
I'll get him to do it
one
again.
day.
Don't worry,
so,
it'll happen. I'll make it happen.
So my favorite, that trope of that lone wolf, oh, I don't need anybody trope, is extremely common in D&D, especially among people who haven't played it for very long, or people who maybe aren't the most fun to play with, because it just comes with the nerd culture of this. It's this the Mary Sue, like, I want to be something I'm not in real life. It leads people to make characters that are honestly a little bit cringy in my opinion, but nonetheless, it's your choice. Do what you're gonna do. I'm not gonna put you down for it, but understand that you can create a lone wolf character, someone who doesn't like working well with others. But if you don't work with the people who you were sitting next to or sharing a shared screen with, you're not playing the game. You are playing your own little adventure on the side that people are putting up with because they like you. And don't misconstrue that. If they keep you in the game and you continue to do that, they're not keeping you around because they like your character. They're keeping you around because they hope that you're going to change. I've seen this before. I've played with people who didn't quite grasp the concept, and it did change. And I've still played with these people because it's wonderful to see, especially as someone who was kind of the role play lead for a while. In my first campaign, I was the one who had the most experience outside the DM.
Sure.
I wrote, I had a reason for being there. It was very simple, but I kept building upon it.
Yeah,
I gave,
absolutely.
more
you don't
personality.
Need to start with something like
I didn't.
grand goal or objective.
And honestly, some people think like, oh, I need to write like a backstory for my character that's 3 pages long. You don't.
No.
You give yourself both of my DMs, when we make new characters, they give us a questionnaire. It's like a 20 question questionnaire. And these answers do not have to be complicated. It is just to give yourself an idea of what your character would do in a myriad of situations and why. And what's driving them? Where are they from? Give a little bit of background so that your character isn't a piece of cardboard. It is someone that you can think about and do things through in an organic way, in a way that's not it's not daunting, because you already know. You came up with it. You chose the DM, and they were like, we like this. And if they don't like something, they'll just
you're
change
also
it a bit.
excited and passionate about it, which will then even more provide that feeling of that dopamine hit when you see it's been implemented in the game. You're like, oh my god, I came up with that. It happened. I did the thing.
I did that.
Another thing I did want to specifically touch upon, though, is another trope about this is that people might sometimes, and almost based off of what you kind of example you kind of brought before, Sammy, is people can sometimes have, and I want to get your opinion on this too,
Yeah.
is some people sometimes have the tendency to like literally just copy character, like beloved fictional characters that they've seen before and put them into the game. You know, like
Yeah.
Legolas or you know, Aragon or you know, putting in Dritz or any other kind of
Yeah.
like you know, staple where it's like a character that obviously you know that you love. Like Sam, what do you feel like would be a good kind of a bit of advice or feelings that you would tell those people? Because like for me, I'm like I don't, because I get it. I understand, right? You love that character. You love what they can do. You love how they feel. You love how they act, and like, and that's great. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. If that's the kind of character that you want to play, I don't think necessarily that there should be an abject issue or problem necessarily.
Um.
My only issue, my thing about that is I am just like me as a GM, for instance. I wouldn't allow a person to just play basically just straight up that character, right? If they're like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, I just want to play Aragon or Aragorn or I want to be Legolas, and I'm like, well, you can't just be that character, right? You can make that character here, but what I want from you then is I want you to make it your own. I want you to take like you can be a wood elf, you know, ranger, that can do all this cool dope stuff for sure, absolutely 100%. I'm not gonna let you call him Legolas, like, because
No.
you don't need to be called Legolas. And if you want to kind of behave and act in that way, because here's the thing, even if you choose to behave and like role play as Legolas, I would still be like, yo, that is your Legolas.
Mhm.
You're not necessarily gonna be the exact same as Orlando Bloom played him, or how, you know, Tolkien
I mean,
wrote
unless
him.
he shows up with the wig,
So,
like he puts
yeah.
in the effort
Well,
for
no.
it.
Even then, I would say you're still you're a different Legolas. Okay, you're Legolas light, if
Yeah.
anything,
I
or
I
like,
think
you know,
I
or heavy,
think
maybe. I don't know.
I think people like to take a character trope like that because it's something familiar.
Yeah,
And so
and
when
they
you're
like
bringing
it, and it's
something,
easy.
it's
Like,
comfortable. They're bringing
yes.
something familiar into something very unfamiliar. I personally don't have a problem if you see a famous character, whether it's in fantasy, sci-fi, anime, any cultural thing where there's a character present, you're like, I like that, I want to emulate that. That's fine. What I run into is people that then think they can get away with the same things, and that the world's going to treat them just like it did that character in the
That
media
is
that
another
they're
thing, is
dealing with.
that you're not
That's
that
not going to happen.
character.
You have to write your own story. It can be eerily similar to the story of the character that you are doing, but it's not going to be the same because we're not in the same world. Um, but it's okay. Give yourself a different name. You can still role play similar to what you think that character would do. Eventually, if you're doing it correctly, that character will become your own, because your own role playing style is going to be different than a pre-written fictional character. Even for people like me who you create your own characters, they don't stay the same.
No.
Every time I write a character and then go to play the character, about four things change after the first
Oh
session.
yeah, no. I was gonna
Because
say.
because you write a character a specific way, and then you get to the table and you realize these are the other
Well,
personalities I'm dealing with, and you go on the fly a little.
almost no plan survives
So, yeah,
contact with
no
the
plan.
enemy, right?
Pretty much none.
It just doesn't like, and here's the thing, it's not as if like that those changes are going to be something big or huge a lot of the time. Like again, in those cases where like if you have literally brought like, you know, a kind of a specific idea of your character, what you like to do as their core concept, principles, personality, and then your GM starts maybe trying to change stuff, that's something different.
That's different.
Like that's something that's like, don't allow that to happen. Okay, players, if you're new players, and I've seen this myself, like where I've played a number of like different groups where like some new players came in and they had a certain idea and concept, and then the GM kind of just like stonewalled them or steamrolled over their thing and tried to make them completely different from something that they actually wanted to try because they thought that their idea was dumb or they didn't like it for some reason. And it's like, don't, new players, please don't stand for that. All right, it's not normal, it's not okay for a GM to kind of just try to take your stuff and make their own little like what like. And that's not to say that you shouldn't work with a GM, right?
No, you have to.
If you're coming into a game, coming into the world, absolutely work with your GM to be like, hey, what do you feel like makes sense for your world to come into? Now, and a GM will give you their guidelines and their prerequisites or their requirements, right, for what the type of world that they're playing. Yeah. Now, you as a player, again, this harkens back to what I just said a little while ago of finding the right game for you. You as a player then have to decide, what do you want to play? What character do you want to play? What experience are you trying to have? And if this GM who is presenting that these are the restrictions, these are the requirements, this is what you are allowed to do in his game or their game, if that is maybe going to have a bit of like conflict or contention with the experience you're trying to have, then maybe you just aren't a good fit for that game. And that okay.
Or that character isn't. I think there's also something to be said for types of games. And not every character is going to work in every type of game.
No. But my point being is, especially for new players, they don't necessarily have like a ton of other characters.
True. They're not like me and you.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. For you and I, we probably have like a multitude of ideas for characters. We're like, ooh, I would love to try this, and maybe we can fit this in, and maybe we can like. But also, to be fair, again, at this point, you and I have been playing for a while. And again, at the beginning, it was like I also did have like for me, since you already kind of give an idea how you got into the game, I'll give a little bit of my origin story too. Where the first time I ever played Dungeons and Dragons, it was a one shot. And I had actually been, I had also been watching Critical Role. I had been listening to like Adventure Zone, and a number of other kind of things too. Like I had also been just reading about it for a long time as well. Like just reading up on lore mechanics. But I just, as a child, I just never had anybody that I could play with, But my first time ever playing was, ironically, I was performing in an improv group at the time that literally was doing like live action, like improv / theater, like sketch theater, Dungeons and Dragons style. Like it was a really cool and interesting show. And I met a lot of really cool people on there who obviously were interested and liked Dungeons and Dragons and wanted to try it. And so I ended up playing, it was myself, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I believe there were 6 of us total, who were playing this game. One of us being the GM, and like you were just like, yeah, I'm gonna just run kind of this one little one shot, because I was looking like one of my other castmates was saying he wanted to run and he wanted to try his hand at being a GM because he hadn't done it before. And I was like, great, that's awesome. And like, because I like you, I knew a lot about the game. I had a lot of like information, but not a ton at that time. Like I was still much more bright-eyed, and I was still much more like, I really want to play and experience it. And I have an idea, but I don't really like. And that was where I came up with Alistair. He was my first idea for a character. I wanted him to be like a magic user. Like I wanted to do that because I love magic in almost every medium, like any game or whatever. Like that's magic, usually magic and like swords. A mixture of like melee and magic, even if it's like hand to hand, is always something that I love. But barring that, I also just love magic. So I was like, all right, I'll go with that. And so I kind of looked over a little bit about like, what was kind of the best, like if I wanted to be a wizard or if I wanted to be a sorcerer. And I was like, again, what is the difference between the two? Because as a new player, I didn't know, because I didn't have as much access to all the books and stuff before. Like I'd read like a lot of it third hand or like on websites about more specific things, and I didn't have access to just the books themselves. And even if I did, it was still just like I didn't understand all of that stuff yet. Like it was still relatively new for me. But I looked it up and I asked a couple of my friends and a couple of other people, and like how it was explained to me was like sorcerers are less, like wizards are far more versatile and diverse in the things that they can do, but sorcerers are much better at the limited things that they are able to do. Which is not at all correct or accurate at all in that estimation. As we have, I think at this point, probably beat that dead horse so much at this point of how much sorcerers kind of suck. But regardless, I was like, okay, that's fine. Like because this is like my first game, I don't necessarily need to do a lot of different things. Like I'll just be really good at the things that I'm good at. And so I chose sorcerer to start off with. And it was also, we were like level 1. Like it was a literal level 1 adventure, just a level 1 shot to get our feet wet and to kind of get into it. And so I was also, again, it appealed to me that sorcerers get, what is it? Is it 4 or 6 cantrips or whatever at level 1? Yeah, as opposed to like the wizards 2 or 3 that they get.
I think they get 1 extra.
Yeah,
like
I
that.
think they get 3 because I think the sorcerer got like 2 extra cantrips or something from the wizard. So I think a sorcerer gets like 4, maybe 5, depending on what you choose. I think I also chose a high elf, so I also got like their extra cantrips. So maybe that's what that was. I think it was 4 for sorcerer and then 1 extra one for high elf. So and it, you know, but ironically though, another guy in the party, he chose a wizard too, instead of a sorcerer, and we got to kind of see the difference between them and how it works. And essentially, like we sat down at my buddy's place. He's no longer a buddy anymore. There's kind of a bit of a huge falling out actually. But at the time, he was a pretty cool dude. And he literally brought mushrooms for everybody to try. And so we literally everybody started it was a bit of a wild party. Of course, this is also a actor improviser, you know, get together, so you know there's going to be plenty of you know, stuff around for people to partake of, and they did. And that's I don't know. I wouldn't say it necessarily had a negative effect on the game per se, because everybody was at the end of the day having fun. Like we were all laughing. Though to be fair, that was probably a bit of the stuff that people took, because for me anyway, it basically made me kind of go into a fit of like uncontrollable laughter. Like I was just being forced to laugh. But to be fair, there were also a lot of legitimately funny things happening in the game too, because it was just wild. It was crazy. And again, we had all been improvisers and actors, and so we had like, you know, that aspect to it where we could kind of like think on the fly, react to one another, and make a lot of jokes and have a lot of fun. And it wasn't like a serious game. It was a pretty just it was a one-off level 1 thing. There were a lot of things about it again that weren't great. Like for instance, like I only had like 1 spell slot to like use a spell, and I I didn't have nearly as, but like our health was super freaking low as well, because we didn't necessarily have like all of the rules and how to kind of do that. It was all just like, I think we did just point by, I believe, overall for the stats, or maybe it was just stat array. It was all just a baseline thing. And while it was a lot of fun in a lot of ways, it definitely was not, in my opinion, what would be considered like a true like D&D game. You know, it was much more fun because we bent a lot of the rules, and it wasn't super formal, it wasn't mechanical. We kind of just like we were just improvising and playing like we always kind of did, even in the show. That being the case, though, you know, my next game that I played actually was real D&D. And that's when I really did start to learn about a little bit more of the more fine-tuned mechanical aspects of the game that apply to long-form game, right? A one-shot is you can do whatever, right? One shot really isn't that important. Like, it doesn't matter what happens, and that's why certain stuff and certain things you don't have to take in consideration, because it's one and done. And you can just kind of do whatever you need to do to have a good time. But for long form campaigns, it is important to have at least a little bit of an understanding on how things work, what you're trying to accomplish with your character, with your story, and making sure that you mesh well with the party, you know. That being said, I think another thing too being is like people coming to the table or coming to D&D having the same mentality that you have for video games, I think, is another aspect that I've heard a lot of people are frustrated with, and that it definitely doesn't necessarily blend well in terms of like you can't play this game most of the time with the same mentality that you would play like Skyrim, or heck, even Baldur's Gate 3, you know, like even that, because the rules of engagement are exponentially different. Like there was an article that I read about Baldur's Gate 3 that I think did a great job of explaining and translating and vocalizing how different it is to play a D&D or a TTRPG, a tabletop role-playing game, and a video game. The biggest thing being is a video game, you are always going to have very rigid, strict rules of engagement and interaction with the world, no matter what. They are all, because it is a computer game, because it is a program, they're always, even the most advanced currently, they will always have, it's always going to be predetermined based off of, you know, potentially what choices, potentially what roles that you make in the game, but they only have very limited amount of reactions and choices and responses to what you do or say. Whereas in a tabletop RPG game, the options are endless and limitless, right? In theory, technically speaking, you could make the same argument, say, well, it's only as limitless and vast as your GM is capable of coming up with, right? This is true, but they are still far more prevalent and numerous than a video game could possibly be currently. Even with all the work, and they did such a good job. Like, it is such an incredible game, Baldur's Gate 3. Like, the amount, again, of small, minute, like, details and differences and choices and reactions that any, like, all the NPCs and the creatures and whatever can have is phenomenal and amazing. But that will still always pale presently in comparison to what could happen in a D&D tabletop game. Because your GM, you guys are making the story together. A video game, the story has already been made by other people. It is predetermined. It is pre-planned out, set up. It is the ultimate railroad, which isn't, again, a bad thing. But it does, in a lot of ways, it is a very linear viewpoint, right? It narrows your vision and your scope to, like, this is just what's going to happen, and I can get away with things if I gank the system, right? If I can gank the programming, I can, like, steal whatever I want without anybody noticing it because they can't see me. There's not going to be any negative repercussions for that. Their lives aren't going to be affected. They're not going to change. They're not going to whatever. Like, it doesn't matter, right? Whereas in a D&D RPG or tabletop RPG, if your GM is kind of playing the game, like, to a certain way, and in a way that I personally like a lot, this world is alive. It breathes. Whether you are present or not, things are still happening and occurring, right? These people who you maybe try to steal from, like, you take their money, they're going to go hungry, potentially, and maybe starve. Or they'll, if you try to just, like, break into an establishment and steal something and you get caught, because, they don't have, like, just necessarily easy to see red lines of sight that you can stay out of to just easily, steal something from their line of sight, right? You have to roll a check, because otherwise you're kind of just there in the thing, even though there's light, like, they can see you. This is much more realistic, at least in that sense, ironically. And you can't just do whatever you want without there being reactions to your actions. There are always consequences in a tabletop RPG, because it is not a video game where you can gank the program and system itself and its limitations, right? You as we, I think, have kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, hammered home and highlighted and emphasized, that's the word, as we've emphasized a lot on this channel about, actions having consequences. Certain, your skills are not always going to accomplish everything that you want to happen to the extent that you want it to happen. But you do always have an effect. And so that's always something to keep in mind for new players coming into the game. Same thing as Sam said before about, like, Critical Role. Like, don't expect your table to automatically just be like Critical Role. Don't expect your table to just automatically be like the video game that you were playing, that you can just do whatever. You start just murdering people, there's going to be consequences to that. Like, if you start just, like, randomly murdering and assassinating and stealing people, looting corpses and stuff, the guards are going to start recognizing that. People are going to see it. Your own party members might not be cool with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue most tables won't even let you continue to play. There are a lot of people out there who...
Depends on the table.
I'm sure that there are tables and players who love that kind of game. The reality is that most games you'll play at, being a murder hobo, as we call them, a home, it's this play on the fact that you have nowhere you belong and you just end up in places and kill people, is not, some would say it's a valid way to play the game. I disagree. It's not, because the game is, that's not what this is.
And
it's supposed to be how can you tell a story about that?
That's what I'm saying. Just go play Skyrim or a video game at that point. If you just
that's what you're gonna do,
stuff, everything, just go play on Skyrim then. There's
that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, but there's nothing wrong with it. Unless, of course, again, you're doing it at the complete, disregard of everybody else's experience at the table, especially, again, your GM, right? Your GM has gone through maybe a lot of time and effort to make this world, to make these characters, these NPCs, and if you're just going to go through and start murdering and killing everything without really caring about the story or anything else, and then on top of that, if you get like angry or upset that a GM is like, okay, well, the guards come, they fight you, are you going to surrender? No, I'm going to kill them. Well, they kill you. Like you can't, you are not, you are the hero of this story for certain. You guys are special. I think, again, we've said this on a previous episode too, is if you guys are the only beings in this world that the GM has no control over normally. Yeah. That makes you special. Like how I like to view that is, and I think I may have said this before, is I view it as like the GM is the over god of this world, right? They made it, they created it. And we as the players, we're like visiting gods, right? We are visiting over gods to this other god's world, and we are projecting our avatars down there to experience and interact in that GM's world.
Yeah.
And that being the case, yes, you are special, but that in no way, shape, or form gives you free reign to just start screwing up your over god friend's world, because then they can just say like, okay, well, it all comes and starts killing you. Like,
you know, there's the famous trope of a boulder falls and kills your whole party.
Yeah, rocks fall, and everybody dies.
There's a reason for that, and it's the defense mechanism of how do I deal with people who don't respect the table, because that is what it is. It's about respect. I think there's something to be said where, you know, your character can be a troublemaker, you can do a couple things.
Yeah.
And I urge new DMs to understand that some people aren't going to want to do things the way that you think they're going to want to do them. And you have to roll with that.
Yeah.
You have to adapt.
Work with it.
But the thing is like as long as they're not doing something detrimental to the people in the group, or something that completely derails any semblance of a story.
Least, like disregarding, right? If it is something detrimental to the group, do that with the intention and the desire of it serving a purpose. You are doing this again for story reasons. This conflict can breed amazing connection and can be very like moving and immersive, absolutely, and is realistic. It can provide interest and engagement. And it's not a bad thing to have conflict in the party, but it's about you doing it in the party requires you to be vastly conscious, aware, and considerate outside of the game with your players, right? With your fellow players. If you're going to have conflict in the game between characters or one character in the party in some way, then you have to be doubly like conscious and considerate of your players above board and be straight up with them about it, saying like, hey, this is kind of what he's going to do. Like, you're not just deliberately doing shit to like freak with the party, right? You're not just like literally like going and like telling like, you know, the BBEG like, hey, my party's gonna kill you now or whatever, so you should do something against them. Or like, you know, if your party is talking with the king, you're not just gonna run up and be like, I stabbed the king in front of everybody and take his crown to usurp him or what like that. You're just being a jerk then. Like, that doesn't serve a purpose. How do you expect that to actually work here? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, there is no logic or reason. And a lot of people use the another ancient adage, but this is a very hated negative one of like, oh, well, that's just what my character would do, right? We've all probably heard it before in some form or another. That, oh, they justify these ridiculous actions by, well, that's just what my character would do. And it's like, would he though? Is that what your character would do? Or is that what you want to do in this situation because you think it would be funny, or you think it would be like a meme, or because you just want to kind of screw shit up because you're bored maybe? Like,
yeah, there's tropes of people like that. And to be fair, I think there's something to be said that if you make a character that has some sort of dark issue, and you work with the party, and you're liked well enough, and you have this thing with the DM where you're like, there's going to be a point where I betray them, and you work it out, and there's a story beat, and it's not offensive to anyone. It is a written out, planned out thing. Then maybe you can get away with it.
Serve an amazing hook. It could be an amazing twist.
Thing being is the moment that you make that decision, it's no longer your character. Because the moment that character betrays the party, either you're leaving the table or you're playing a new character, which means you no longer make the decisions, right? And that's cool. That's something neat. I think it can be done well.
Yeah,
I think it can
but
be
there
done.
needs to be a lot of trust
It
at the
can
table.
it can very easily be done terribly, and it shouldn't be something that you want to do straight off the bat. Like when
No.
no, that's something you do when you are used to these people for a long time.
If you have established a relationship, friendship, and rapport, then you can maybe think about doing some stuff. But yeah, excuse me, I have a bit of a hiccups for some reason.
No worries.
Coming with that like right out the gate to a brand new group and party is
No.
I would say it's highly suggested against. Like don't
you're not even going to get to play if that's the attitude you take with what you want to do at a table and you're new. No one's going to bring you into their table.
Yeah.
And once you try to do those things at a table without telling anyone, you're not going to stay at that table either. And I'm not saying this as to be mean. It's 100% for your own benefit. You need, like, the whole point of this game is to work with the other people at the table.
Yeah.
Your character doesn't have to like everyone.
No.
There is a distinct there can be disagreements. There can be a difference in
inter-party conflict, methods,
a difference in ideals can actually do a lot for a story.
Again, conflict can breed growth and connection and immersion. It's great.
Yeah. In my first game, I was a barbarian, but I was also religious. I ended up multi-classing in paladin, stuff like that. There was a person in our party who was a necromancer. And at first it was like he had like one zombie or like two zombies, and he'd only do it from like the bad people that we killed, and he only used them to fight other bad people. So like I didn't like it, but I made like excuses for it. I was like, well, we're on the same side, it's okay. But as things started to get darker and darker, and like he had his own weird laboratory, and like I didn't really understand what he was doing. My character wasn't the smartest, so I assumed the worst. And there was inter-party conflict. I broke into his lab, I destroyed shit because I was like, this has to stop. And I may have done it a little bit early in how long I'd known these people, but we'd been playing for a while, and I didn't do it aggressively. It was more like, no, this is not okay.
Yeah.
And we had to have a conversation like in the game as a party. And it was something that like after that it was great. Fine.
Yeah, because it can bond you even more so. If you have a party and you eventually get to that like climax, that finale of like it bubbles over finally, where you had kind of maybe these disagreements, and you get to that point where you had that confrontation. Once again, if this is occurring, you should always probably check in like after session to be like, hey, are we still good? Are we cool? Like, I just want to make sure that, what's going on between our characters is just between our characters, and that we're still good. And then, as long as it's like, yeah. And to be fair, a lot of people might not feel comfortable being honest. Like if they do feel kind of slighted, because again, these characters are still parts of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're playing them, you care about them, you like them, and there's always going to be a bit of you in them. And so you're going to feel like, for instance, I think I have maybe like two examples of how this can be done in a bad way and how this can be done in a good way, and how it's been kind of sorted out for me personally, how I've experienced this. The good way that I feel like it's done is like I'm currently in another campaign at the moment where I'm a rogue and there's another rogue in the party as well. And over the course of a couple of sessions, like there's been like a bit of a almost professional rivalry between the two of us as rogues, right? Like we have a bit of a thing where like we kind of have been like kind of tricking or pranking the other in a sense. And like we have I'm a bit of a younger character, and then their character is like an older grandma kind of rogue or whatever, who like always seems to have like a bit of a thing about like, young whippersnappers and the like. And my character is very kind of verbose or slick and kind of debonair in essence. And they have a bit of a relationship where they do kind of poke at each other and kind of, but it's again, in a sense, at least how I feel, and I always do my best to kind of check in, is to be like, it's just a fun little like, professional rivalry where she literally like pickpocketed me one time and stole 10 gold, and like there's a session I was just rolling garbage and she was like tripping me up with like, because she's an arcane trickster character, and her character or their character was just like tripping me up. And even though I should have been fine with it, the likelihood that I would fail was low. I did, because I was rolling badly. And the next session, that started to happen to their character, where they were kind of rolling badly. And I was like, and my character was kind of showing them up and like pickpocketed them back, and like, was doing a lot of fun little things between each other. And like that kind of rivalry and that kind of like, again, conflict in a sense, I think can breed a little bit more character and life into the campaign, the relationship, especially in this kind of world. It allows you to kind of use your abilities to on each other in a fun, again, not like hostile or toxic way.
Yeah, it's like Gimli and Legolas.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the moment where he tells him to throw him
yeah,
when they're fighting in what city? Minas Tirith.
yeah, Minas
Right?
Tirith. Yeah, I think it was Minas Tirith.
When he tells him to throw him onto the bridge is the moment you realize, oh no, they do actually care about each other.
They're
And
friends.
but the whole time they're bickering, they're messing with each other,
all the time.
they're being a little mean, but like at the same time, the entire time that they're doing that, they're doing their job, which is killing the things in front of them and making sure nobody dies.
Protecting each other. They still, despite all of their differences, all of their like Sam said, their bickering and their qualms, they will die for one another.
Yeah, they almost did many times, and that's the whole point. Is like, you can. Again, the whole disagreement with people, like I like party conflict. I've had instances of party conflict
at times. Yeah.
Now, again, though, especially as new players, I think avoiding it is better off than not.
For new players, this is definitely not a dynamic that you probably want to start off with. Like you want to probably be much more cohesive and accommodating.
It's difficult.
and yeah, because again, it also has to do like Sam said, you have to have a good relationship kind of outside the game too. Like you have to make sure that you're in real life. Friendship and relationship is pretty solid if you're going to start doing this kind of stuff, that you jive with this person and that you let them know this isn't anything personal to you. I'm not trying to attack you. Again, for instance, I can on the other hand, I've had experiences in the negative with this a number of times where people, it has felt like they are again deliberately attacking like me and my character, like for no real reason. Like just because they were being jerks, or just I couldn't even really understand what their point was or what the actual like, purpose was, because I didn't seem like there was one. It seemed like they were just being attacking and accusatory and hostile. One particular and not all of them were doing it on purpose. Some of them I think were, but not all of them were. And so I'll go over the one particular situation was, a number of my, again, same group of friends that I had in that D&D improv show that I was performing in. We were starting to do now a long form campaign now, and we had been going for a little while now, and there had been a particular character who and she was new. She had never played before. This was her first time ever playing, and she made a character. She was a changeling arcane trickster rogue. And she, for whatever reason, kind of just had a bit of a thing towards my character. Who was Alistair. He's a bit more, verbose. He's confident. He can be a bit of a smart aleck or a bit detached from reality at times, due to his intelligence, as well as him being an elf and being kind of, detached in general from a lot of things that other shorter-lived races might, not understand. And so she kind of would be a bit of a bully to him. She would kind of pick on him or mess with him, or she also was kind of an evil character. She was doing kind of evil things where she would steal from people again, and then at one point it got to the point where she literally tried to give Alistair a wedgie. She literally tried to she was and she had super high sleight of hand. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna roll sleight of hand to give you a wedgie. And I'm like, that's not how that works. You can't just roll sleight of hand to then be oh yeah, I'm able to just give your character a wedgie because you have a +20 or whatever to the roll. That's not how that works. Also, why are you doing that? What if you do that, Alistair will then attack you, because that's a straight up you are straight up now starting to invade on some weird personal stuff. You are starting to kind of he would consider that you assaulting him now. So it's that particular thing, again, you have to wonder, there was no reason for that, right? That kind of interaction, that kind of sniping or conflict, it doesn't serve a purpose. Giving another NPC or another PC character a wedgie, or literally bullying them, giving them a swirly, that's not a funny little prank thing that you're doing in good fun or whatever, or jest.
I mean, the idea of this is that we're supposed to be adults.
Yeah, or again, also just being being together, right? Cooperative. Why would I ever feel trusting towards you if you're going to be giving me wedgies? Again, it's not a funny little prank kind of thing. Like that's something you do to someone that you're trying to screw with and mess with because you don't feel good about yourself or something, right? Like, and so again, I kind of confronted and talked to her about this after the game, and I was like, so what is going on with you? Like, why are you picking and messing with me and my character? What's up? And she was like, what? Oh, I don't, like, she was completely flabbergasted. Like she came off. She was like, I wasn't trying to like be mean or to whatever. I was like, oh, I'm like, okay, if you weren't trying to be like mean or a jerk, what were you trying to do? And she was just like, I don't know. I was just, I guess I was just kind of reacting to the thing. You know, I felt like, you know, for my character, she just feels like your character doesn't necessarily really need her or like necessarily care about her or whatever. And so she's just kind of like, I was like, okay, I all right, I can understand maybe why you might feel that way. Although I will put forth, like, I kind of give a rebuttal in terms. I'm like, he doesn't necessarily agree with a lot of the decisions that you have been making in terms of like, you know, stealing from people or kind of like killing certain people or like NPCs or prisoners that we had. But he has also shown care about you and your character in terms of like, he has, you know, he has protected you. He has asked if you were okay after a fight when when you got hurt really badly at one point. Like, he deliberately went and tried to protect you and to support you. And so like, again, I feel like there's a bit of a dissonance or a disconnect from like what you feel is coming from him than what I'm actually trying to convey here. And, you know, so it was a really interesting conversation. And she eventually did end up kind of admitting that she was like, yeah, I guess I guess I was feeling kind of just a little disconnected or a little like whatever. And I wasn't really thinking a lot about what I was actually doing. And after that, a lot of things started to change, and that she wasn't nearly as kind of bullish or shitty towards my character anymore. Like, she didn't just try to like pull, you know, to literally bully him anymore. It was much more like, hey, okay, she has a thing that she's doing. She has a goal, and, you know, she has come to the understanding that, hey, yeah, Alistair cares about her. He's trying to help her out. Like, he doesn't necessarily agree with what she's doing because she is kind of doing some evil stuff. But he's still there to help and support her when it really needs to happen. And so that is one example that I can give of like, that is not a good conflict to have with the party, but it turned out well. It got better due to, again, having a conversation about it and checking in outside of the game to say like, hey, what is your thought? Because it could also just be, people might not even be aware, right? People might just fall into certain like patterns or behaviors that they're not necessarily even really wanting to do. Like, she herself was even like, she's like, I don't want to actually do that. Like, I don't really want to do that. It doesn't feel great, but I kind of just reacted. I made a choice, and I kind of felt like I was just kind of stuck there now. And for anybody else who might feel like that at any point, it's like, please don't, you know, like, don't feel like when you made a choice or if you did this thing, don't feel like you have to stay there. Like,
Yeah.
if that doesn't feel good for you, it probably certainly doesn't feel good for anybody else. Like, don't feel like you need to be stuck in this place because, you know, you're embarrassed or you feel like, you know, humiliated or scared of like being like, hey, you know what, I made a mistake. I messed up, or I did something that maybe wasn't really cool or that, you know, I didn't even really like. You know, it's like, just, it's okay to have a conversation, and it's okay to talk with them. And in certain other events or situations, again, that I've experienced, like, there have been others where people have just been like assholes, where they've just like insulted my character, where they have just like tried to like lay the blame at his feet for things that have happened. Like, I was in another game where I was playing a tiefling rogue again, and this one barbarian orc, he was like an orc barbarian, like, for whatever reason, he just didn't like my character again. Like, it just seemed like, and maybe it was also just me he didn't like me or my character. I wasn't entirely sure, because again, I was never able to bring it up with him like in real life, although I tried to kind of bring it up with him even in game, to like be like, hey, what's up? And he didn't really respond or react. Like, he kind of like backed down, like, because he would always basically like just start being real, like, literally hostile, like threatening my character to like attack and or kill him if like he did something that he didn't even really do, or if he like even thought about potentially betraying the party or doing whatever. And I don't know if it's because I was like a tiefling and a rogue that like he was like saying like, well, because tieflings and rogues are just inherently usually like evil or duplicitous or manipulative or whatever. And it's like, okay, it's okay to have that, maybe a bit of that character thing, because it's like, sure, you know, it's like in the world, and I know a lot of, I maybe not a lot, but I know some people might disagree with this, but I am, not only am I not opposed, but I even appreciate the fact that a D&D game can have biases, right? It has reflections of the real world. So slavery did exist. It happened. It still does happen to a certain extent, and maybe different forms in many ways. It is still prevalent and current. And so having that in the game is like, that's not unrealistic. And in fact, I like that, because then it's like, hey, this gives us an opportunity to maybe fix it, to stop it in some way, or to address it in some way. It also just gives, again, more lifelike and immersion, more conflict that you can help to affect in some way in the game. Freaking, you know, bias is also a thing that is always just going to be prevalent. And so trying to make it be like, oh, well, we don't tolerate any kind of in-game bias, so that makes me uncomfortable. It's like, well, yeah, it's meant to. Like it's meant to serve a purpose on like, hey, this is a thing that happens in real life. So how are we going to navigate it, right? Doing it in D&D, where you have so much more control over a thing, can make it can provide, in my opinion, ample opportunity to maybe learn how to navigate. When you're doing this with a group of your friends, of all things, where like, again, outside of the game, if you have great trust in your GM and he's presenting you with this character that's behaving in this manner that is appalling or disgusting or repugnant, this gives you a great opportunity to learn how to deal with that, because then you can start maybe utilizing this experience in the real world even. Or you can also maybe just have stress relief and then just beat the crap out of the guy if he's a completely unrepentant garbage.
It's one of those things of like, we are like in this world, we're all human, and we still hate each other for stupid reasons. Yeah. Did you not think in a world where there's like 14 to 15 standardized
like there's
races of humanoids that people aren't going to have issues with one another?
Differences, some biases, some cultural...
I mean, come on, guy. Like it's not even like this is uncomfortable and inappropriate. No, it's entirely accurate to what society would look like. It's not perfect. It's not supposed to be.
Like,
there's going to be
it's
like,
not supposed to be a perfect Shangri-La fantasy, right?
I have
fantasy.
I have a friend of mine who he started running a game for some of his friends, and he warned some of them. He's like, there's going to be some racism depending on the characters you pick.
Yeah.
And they're like, why? Why would you do that? And he goes, I'm not doing it because of you. I'm doing it because
I'm not doing it.
Look at all the like. He's like, can you tell me that there's going to be no bias between these four groups of people just based on the fact they live different lengths?
What conflict would there be? What would you do as a D&D party?
There
would be no war, there would be no battle, there'd be no conflict, there'd be no problems. It would be a perfect Shangri-La paradise.
No, it doesn't exist.
And it doesn't exist
in the real world. It doesn't exist in the fake world.
It wouldn't really give you much to do in a game.
There's nothing to do there.
You couldn't fight anything. You couldn't really change much. It would just be why do anything then? Yeah. There is no conflict. Again, conflict is a thing that breeds change and growth. That is what is so great. That is what is amazing about this game, is the growth, whether it be, experience, but also in the game as characters, as players, the world itself. Yeah. And so go ahead, buddy.
I urge, we're obviously talking about something that for some people, I don't think it would bother either of us if it was in a game. There are some topics, and I'm stressing this to players and GMs, new and old, but mostly new. There are certain topics that you maybe don't want to touch. And
there's a line, I would say.
There is a line, and
again, for some people, there's a line for some people, and that certain line, in my opinion, is fine. Again, for me, I will say, I'm not very squeamish, so I'm pretty open to.
No, I'm good with that.
Anything, so long as, again, it serves a purpose.
Which is the main problem.
That is the biggest issue. And I have another perfect example for a thing that did not serve a purpose and was just gratuitous and explicit for just and no real reason, and for many reasons that were not okay.
Like, I think a good rule of thumb is to try to stay away from anything overtly sexual. Obviously, you can imply things. My DM always does the fade to black, and it's done.
Just gratuitous. Like, again, if you are trying to instill a certain feel or ambiance of like a place, like, again, for instance, if you're having a campaign that's based in like the Abyss, or maybe not even the Abyss, but based off of Gratz, right? The demon prince of pleasure, pain. He is overtly sexual and not just that, but debaucherous, right? Like taboo, sinful in that more sexual nature. You are going to be experiencing themes of that nature and should probably be prepared for that. However, even with that being the case, the GM does have a responsibility to keep to their players and the people participating that, again, it needs to serve a purpose. Like, if you talk about how this is like some kind of taboo, weird kind of stuff that's happening, you don't necessarily need to go into maybe grotesque, unnecessary detail about everything. You can just describe it to your characters like, you witness this sight that appears that drudges up immense feelings of discomfort, of strangeness, of like weird foreign kind of feelings, and yet also cannot pull your eyes away, cannot help
but a car accident.
Entranced and intrigued, even as your body begins to inadvertently kind of maybe heat at the whatever. It's like, again, you are providing a context and what's the word I'm looking for? Not example, but basically for an area, for a situation, you're providing context and a feeling of what it, or an example of what your characters are feeling in response to this, due to like,
it's an insinuation of what might be going on without telling them exactly what it is. And
you don't need to be saying like, oh yeah, he's like shoving the
and
it's like, reason, you know,
the reason I say that is because there are specific topics that, for real reasons, might not want to be talked to about at a table.
Triggers. There are all kinds of triggers.
Think I'm just gonna say the R word is a good example.
Yeah,
it's something that, because it's something that happens, especially in war-torn places and things that are really messed up. But maybe, well, you don't explicitly talk about it.
Yeah, you don't have to necessarily say. You can insinuate.
You can insinuate that like, terrible things happen and people are being abused.
Happen, and there is abuse, and it happens. But you don't need to like describe an event happening. Like, I think that's not necessary. I will also specifically reference, like, again, another experience that I had, which is like gonna be my go-to horror story at this point for myself, is one campaign that I was a part of. This one guy, like, literally, we were playing a session, and he literally essentially enslaved a player character because they failed 2 saving throws, and then began to again like do they began to abuse them in a completely uncool way, without, or rather their character, without the player even being aware of what was happening. Like, they literally like just like texted me one time, they're saying like, your character, due to your incredibly high passive perception, wakes up in the night to hearing the sounds of whatever happening, and you witness this sight. And like, immediately I was just like, nope. No. I literally messaged him. I'm like, okay, does this player know that you are doing this to their character? Are they aware of it? And their response was literally like, well, does a person ask permission from God if they get mugged in the street or whatever? And I'm like, that is in no way, shape, or form the same thing at all.
Yeah.
Are they aware? And you did not answer my question. Are they aware that this is what's happening? And they're
to
like,
their own character.
They are aware that their character now belongs to someone else. And I'm like, that is not how that works. Again. Not just what I asked, but that is not how that works. You don't get to just take control. GMs, and this is also for new GMs too, but players as well, keep in mind, GMs do not get the rights or the ability to just snatch your character away and just do whatever the heck they want to them, like, forever. You know what I mean?
even in the cases of like mind control and stuff, the best way to do that is to tell the player themselves,
Yeah,
you are now controlled by this entity. What would you do? Because that's more fun than just being
more
like,
fun for
he
one,
attacks you now.
and even that, like, again, that only really happens with like a dominate spell,
Yeah.
or an effect, and those spells usually only last for very short periods of time for very specific reasons. There are, again, charm spells and the like that can last longer, but those are no way, shape, or form mind control. If a
No.
creature is charmed, all that means is that they regard whoever has charmed them as basically being like a very close friend and confidant, if not maybe like a love interest, depending. But that still doesn't mean that you just get to control them however you want. They can have influence, they can have advantage on convincing you, or whatever, but you're not going to be going against your very nature or just allowing things to happen that you don't want to happen. Whereas that is exactly what this guy did. Like, he kept trying to like dodge around the question and everything and stuff, and eventually I just got to the point where I'm like, okay, no, this is it. And there have been a lot of other issues and problems and huge red flags with this guy previously before as well. But that was the moment where I was like, all right, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. You can't just take a character. Like, he tried to make excuses. He was like, well, there are some instances in a game where player agency needs to be stripped for the good of the narrative. And it's like, okay, sure. You know what? I could maybe give you that to an extent. But this does not fit any real narrative here. This isn't providing any purpose, any whatever. This is just a gratuitous, horrendous kind of scene that you are presenting for reasons that you don't even know yourself. Because he literally admitted previously that that entire campaign he was making up off the cuff, flying by the seat of his pants the entire time, which was completely obvious because it was bad. It was horrible. It was horrendous. And I don't normally like to say that about games because, again, a lot of time people can put in a lot of effort and time into it, and even if it might not fit with me, it's like, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad game. But I can absolutely say, just objectively, that was a horrible game.
Yeah.
For many reasons. And it was like that didn't serve a purpose. Like, you didn't even talk to the player about this happening. That proves to me this didn't have a purpose. You just took their character and did this thing to them because it was your own sick kind of whatever crap. And that is never and should never be tolerated or allowed in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And that again, that is the difference between a situation where there is like conflict and there is even trigger or a lot more sensitive topics and issues that do not provide a thing, and you should absolutely get probably the hell out of there if that is the thing that your GM is like trying to do or even justify, because it's just like it is not okay.
No. I think that there is a case to be made. Like, so in D&D, especially if you played for a little bit or your campaign has a lot of fights and people are, you're killing evil people or fighting a lot of people, and there's a lot of like back and forth, death and destruction and strife. There is kind of something that I saw happen firsthand, and I'm also guilty of this just as much, is the fact that as things get tense and things like that, you will often make violent decisions. And this is new players, old players, GMs. Like, this is something you should probably understand, is that if you say you're in a campaign that there's a war going on or some form of big evil threat that everyone knows about and it's very present, people are getting killed, towns are being destroyed, don't be surprised if your players start resorting to the tactics that you use. There's something that, like, a lot of people don't realize this. It's very easy to have a character slip into the realms of torturing prisoners to get answers for things. And to be fair, again, this is not an uncommon tactic used in the real world, used in fantasy tropes, all of this. And so, but there's going to be a point where either you as a fellow player or you as a GM might be uncomfortable with how far things are going, or you don't like that they're doing that. You have to talk to them, not in the game, outside of the game. Stop your game. If something happens that you're like, oh no, we can't. I'm sorry, we can't. Stop your game. Stop the game
good
and just be like, hey,
if you're going to like implement these kinds of like aspects in your game, it's always good to have like, safe words, trigger phrases, or anything else, or just other kind of like, you know, things in place that your players can utilize to convey their discomfort or their whatever, their anxiety or whatever about a scene or topic or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
It's always important, and just like, again, the same thing with inter-party conflict thing, always great to check in after session or before to be like, hey, everybody's still cool, everybody okay? Like, people are still feeling comfortable and enjoying things. Because again, first and foremost, the biggest priority, in my opinion, of any GM should always be to be like, hey, are you still having fun? Are you having fun? Are you enjoying your time? That is the point of this. And it's a GM's job to make that happen and make sure that that is still happening for the majority of people involved. And, you know, so it's like,
I think the reality is that not every, like, I've had multiple characters that if they get angry and we have a prisoner, they're going to resort to that. And I think it is something that I can confidently say, yes, that is what my character would do in this situation. This person works with a group of people that they want to destroy, and they are willing to do whatever means necessary.
And here's the thing, because that you can say that and you can use that phrase, because it's not only not illogical, but it's not also being overall detrimental to the party in that sense. Like, it's like,
but it can cause conflict and it can cause problems, and you have to be aware that you're not the only person in a group. And so the last time that happened, I threatened somebody, and one of the characters at our table was like, you need to stop. He's like, this isn't okay. He's like, we have other ways of doing this. You don't have to do this anymore. And my character was pissed. I was like, well, fuck this then. I don't need y'all. I'm not doing this. Like, and I left. And one of my DM, he has a DM PC, like, he's always ran with the party since the beginning. So he followed me, and he was like, what is going on? He's like, why? Like, what? Like, he's like, you need to come back. Like, you're part of this team. And I'm like, no, like, we don't align anymore. And it was this whole big discussion. I went back in. I was like yelling at people. Like, it was this whole, like, we as a group were discussing it. My character was definitely a little bit more animated because what we were dealing with hit very close to home for him. And so it was one of those things where it's like, by the end of it, no one was mad at each other. It was all okay. But it's those things like that cause tension. Tension causes more tension. It causes things to escalate, and not just out of the table. Like, as a character, things will escalate depending on how dire things are. And
absolutely, as it should. You should let the world and the circumstances affect your character and you, right?
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be afraid to express yourself and your character in terms of what they would do. Again, I want to specifically use Sam's like example with the previous example we gave before to show the blatant difference in application of this is what my character would do, right? In the previous example, we said, like, you know, again, if you have like a party who's like talking with a king, right, about like something bad going on, he's trying to elicit their help, and one of your party members just, again, runs up and just stabs him in the face because, like, you know, he, like, whatever, like, they can even make the argument that king is responsible for the death of my entire family or house, and so I'm gonna run up and kill him. And it's like him saying, like, okay, that's what my character would do. It's like, okay, would he though? Does that make sense? If he really wanted to get vengeance on this king, would he really just run up in plain full view of everyone and everybody here? There's guards all around to try and stab and kill this guy here. Like, is that really your character? That was their intelligence? They didn't have any other plan, and they were just gonna, like, that doesn't make sense, right? That's not a great plan. That doesn't actually help anything. In fact, it also screws over your party, because now it's going to be like, oh, well, you're part of their party, so now they might assume that all of them were trying to assassinate the king, and then it ends up in a detrimental aspect for everybody, and they might even get thrown into jail, executed, or at best banished, right? Which then screws up an entire plot line and a whole thing that the GM just set up to make happen, because your character or whatever, like, you couldn't have thought of a better way to, like, pursue this plot line and this aspect of your character than just trying to run up and, like, very few people are that dumb, especially you as a class player character, right? You don't have to play dumb and just mindless like that. No. As opposed to what Sam described in terms of, like, this is a thing. People get in that place, right? People feel emotion and they start to behave and act irrationally. And while again, we could absolutely say that the previous example is an irrational kind of thing, it's still not realistic in my opinion. In the case, I'm like, that's just not necessarily what you do there. Like he has almost no chance of accomplishing what he wants to accomplish. Whereas with Samsung, it's like, hey, this does hit home, and this person wants to accomplish this thing that they want, right? And so they're not above torturing this guy. They're not necessarily going to kill him. This particular situation.
Oh, I mean, to be fair, he gladly would have. But
He
the reality
maybe.
was, like, my character is rather bloodthirsty. Rather,
Yeah,
like, this is
sure.
the antithesis to his story. This is what he wants to accomplish, and so it's right there in front of you. You're going to do something about it. And the
But
thing
it's also
is,
true that this guy is like, this guy's a bad guy, right? This guy was here. He did some bad stuff. Torture probably isn't the most moral way to go about getting what you want, but it's also not as if he's doing this to someone who like doesn't deserve it, or again, like doing this in a sense that it's like, hey, I'm trying to accomplish what I need to accomplish, and me doing this isn't going to just screw over the rest of the party by me doing.
I didn't pull a random guy off the street, put a knife to his throat, and say, "Tell me your name or I'll kill you."
Yeah,
you know,
like,
it's not.
He clearly had a connection. He clearly had personal involvement that was clear, that prompted and showcased the fact, and even with all of his anger, he also still heard the party. He didn't just act completely independently. When the party like spoke up and they reacted to what he was doing, he responded to them. He showed them that kindness, that consideration, ironically, even in his rage, even in his moment of being like, hey, no, I have to do this. Like, you know, he didn't just simply disregard them and do his own thing in like completely. And the fact that, again, he walked away shows once more that it's like, okay, he still respected what they said. He didn't just blow them off and keep doing whatever. He still respected the party, what they had to say, what was happening. And that is a good showcase of, again, you are still considering and being part of it. You are not just disregarding. You're not just doing what. And so that is what your character would do. Your character can have those moments of weakness, rage, fear. Like if you run away from certain fights or encounters, you know what I mean? It's like where it's like, if you're scared, if you feel like something's going to happen, multiple people have died. It's like, you know, and some people might feel angry or upset about that. But in my opinion, it's like, that's fair. That is a fair moment to be like, hey, that's what your character would do. Because again, here's the thing. What you do next is your character learns from that and it grows from that. And it doesn't necessarily do that same thing again. You know, if you have a person, if a character who got frightened and ran away from a fight or whatever, which again, I would only suggest you do after you have established, you know, a solid relationship and friendship and rapport with your party. Again, all of this stuff is something you shouldn't do right off the gate in a brand new group, especially if you're brand new playing. But this is just an example, you know, of like red flags for people who might do this, especially when you're not familiar with them. It is okay to have those kinds of player flaw or character flaws or traits, so long as, again, they serve the purpose of growth and connection with people and showing that this is how you grow. You overcome your flaws. If you're going to have flaws, they need to be flaws that you can overcome. Otherwise, they're just detrimental and they're just going to bring everything down more and more and more. Like there's no reason to keep a flaw unless, again, it really isn't that harmful. Like unless it's like a particularly harmless flaw that's kind of just more for like funny flavor. But if it's literally a flaw that's like, you know, affecting your party in terms of like, hey, I'm gonna run away from a fight, or hey, I'm going to cause a lot of fights. Like I'm gonna start fights with people, and hey, I'm gonna, like, you know, put my party in very precarious situations. Like, don't do that unless again, you can do it like once. And then you need to start learning how to not do that.
Yeah, because I think it's something you can present as like, this is a problem my character has, and that's why he's at where he's at. But again, the thing is once you do that, someone's going to call you out, and you can't just stick. You're not sticking the mud.
You can't just basically be like, no, this is fine. This is fine. My character does this because he does this. It's fine. That's not a reason. That's not a purpose.
No, that's like the meme with the dog sitting at the table with his coffee and everything's on fire. This is fine. Yeah. No, it's not, because the thing is like your flaw is now affecting the party, which baseline is an okay thing. If your character makes a bad decision that affects the people he's with, that is okay in general, because it creates something for the party. But you cannot just keep like time after time after time after
Again,
time
disregarding
making the same
them.
mistake.
That's
Because
the problem.
it doesn't even make sense. Like you wouldn't do that in real
No,
life.
that's what I'm saying. It's illogical. And again, if
Yeah.
you do it in real life, then you clearly have no friends.
You maybe need to go talk to somebody.
And then you probably shouldn't be playing this game to begin with, because this is a game you play with people you want to cooperate with. Go play Skyrim or Baldur's Gate or Dragon Age or whatever else to get your trolley murder hobo rocks off or whatever. But don't come playing this, because that's not what this is for overall. Yeah. But yeah.
Do we want to go into like maybe some stuff we recommend for newer players to try in terms of characters?
I was thinking, I think we've kind of given a decent kind of description.
This is definitely something that we like a lot.
Yeah. But I think it'd be great if we go maybe a little bit more mechanical aspect of like, hey, these are maybe some great like classes to start off with. We did it a little bit, I think, in our classes episodes where we talked about that, but we can go maybe a little bit more depth about some of them now that we feel like are great ways for you to like start, like what classes probably work best for beginners, as well as maybe some cool feats or things or items that could be cool. Just whatever we think might make your experience like, a little bit easier, a little bit better, more fun your first time out.
Yeah. I did want to tap your brain a little bit. So when I first started playing, my go-to was like for newer players was always a martial class.
Oh yeah. I would
rogue,
agree for the most
ranger, like rogue, ranger, fighter, barbarian.
I would always say barbarian is always my go-to like starter class for any person starting. Is like, barbarian, you're gonna survive. You might not be able to do a lot of variations of stuff depending on what subclass you choose, of course. But even then, a lot of them do have a lot of great meaty things for you to do, both role play wise as well as
My question for you is: there's gonna be a lot of people who start playing this game who want to play a spellcaster. That's what they want to do. They're gonna start that way. So part of me, and something that I've been told by one of my DMs, was he thinks that like cleric and druid are a good choice for the sole reason that it has the opportunity of changing what spells you get to use. Because for someone who doesn't play a lot of spellcasters and maybe doesn't know what all the spells do, if you pick the wrong ones, it can be detrimental to how long you are stuck with those spells. Now, obviously, we've talked about the fact that if someone who's come to your table, played a character and went, this is not working, and you let them change it. But I kind of understand, for context,
I do get your
clerics
choices having weight. Like
because he played a wizard as his first character, which he admitted was difficult for him. He said it took a long time to fully understand what he was able to do.
It is. They can be very complicated and complex at times.
We'll talk, like, spellcasting in general is more difficult. There's more things you have to know how they work, how they interact with other things. There is. And I will say this: if you are coming into a new game as a spellcaster and you don't know what to grab, ask the people in your party, ask your DM. Think, because they might give you stuff that you'll listen to, and they might that you don't listen to, and that's okay. But you're asking for advice, their input, because we're playing together.
Yeah, if we're playing together,
it's a reasonable thing to ask. Yeah. I always try to do this with people who are newer to the spells. I try to help them go through their spell list and be like, hey, they'll be like, oh, I like this one.
Of course, I don't want to.
I don't force
project or get it.
We have a newer player in my Tuesday campaign who picked Warlock, but we started at like level 16, so it's hard for him. He's never played before.
Yeah,
he started at level 16. That's a rough
high level to start.
Luckily, Warlock is a little bit easier because you're very limited. But the reality was, he's like, I don't know what to pick. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, look through these and see which ones you like, and I'll let you know if they're worthwhile, like, to take. And I'll let you know why I feel that way. And that's what I did. And he picked some stuff that I don't necessarily agree with, but I'm like, hey, go have fun. What you want.
Because I was gonna say, like, one of the biggest things, especially for spellcaster classes that I do, and to answer your previous question about, I'll answer your previous question about like cleric/druid, is like, I asked, like, hey, what do you want to do as a character, right? If you want to be a spellcaster, what do you want to do with magic, right? Do you want to be like someone that can like fire off fireballs and fiery like spears and rays and beams and stuff like that? Do you want to be like attacking, or do you want to be somebody who can like manipulate materials and stuff like that and elements? What do you want to do, right? And based off of kind of what they're like, what they're wanting to do, I'm like, okay, cool. Here's now my example of like my opinion on what has been in my experience, the most prominent aspects that could be applicable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is usually in my experience what a campaign normally consists of, what spells are used most of the time, what could be most helpful and applicable to a situation that you'll be doing. And I try to like kind of converge those two things together to meet in a middle and a point where, you know, it is their character, they can do kind of what they want to do while still having potential viable options for them to choose from in a moment that, you know, can provide them to make them feel good. Because again, like to your point and like to your friend's point about, you know, those two classes, my only contention with suggesting a player start with cleric or druid is the fact that they have the longest active spell lists. Like they because they have all of their spells available to them basically like right away, whatever level you're at, and there's a lot of them. It can be incredibly overwhelming to a new players for that reason alone. Because it's like, it's just like with clerics, it's just like you're like, even as an experienced player, it can be overwhelming the amount of spells and stuff that you have active, like, or you have access to, even at lower levels where you're just like, what do I pick? Like, what am I supposed to?
Well,
and
you
it's like,
always take ceremony, the most useful spell.
No. Always do not take ceremony.
You can prepare it, so it's not. You don't even have to pick it. It's just there, and you take it because it's good. Either way,
it's worthless. The only thing
it's
good
not.
It is good. We talked about this in our spells episode. You can help
people
Sam.
get married. Adam.
Yes, that is the only good aspect. And even then, it only lasts for like 10 days or whatever. And you should only do it if you're going to marry your entire party. That is the only viable way to go about doing that.
No,
otherwise
you marry NPCs together because it's a nice touch.
No, because then you have to take them into combat with you, and then they die, and then you lose it.
You're not using it for fighting.
You have to be within 30 feet of each other.
For what?
For the AC bonus.
Oh, I'm not you don't do it for the AC bonus. You do it for the role play.
Then you don't need the spell for it. Then you can just do it. But
it makes it magic-y and official. It's fun.
Either way, more official because there's magic involved. The magic should be the love that they have between each other, Sam.
Yeah,
love is the most powerful magic.
But the magic that I have,
J.K. Rowling said so. Okay,
she wrote about it in
her book in Harry Potter.
But she's terrible.
She's very problematic. She's very problematic.
She's not even that great of a writer. But the reality is to give context to what we're.
I love that series. So
I as an adult, it has waned out of my.
There's a lot. It's still fun. Like I like the movies. The movies are really cool. Like
it's weird.
And, dude, Hogwarts Legacy was an amazing game. That was super fun.
Yeah.
There was a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Help me out here, Sammy. What's the thing where people are in conflict? There was a lot of
about what?
J.K. Rowling and the game.
Oh, do you like the cancel culture stuff?
Cancel culture, but that's not the word that I'm looking for. And there's like when it's like a debate, a hot topic kind of debate.
Oh, it was. It was kind of.
I can't think of the word. God damn.
At the end of the day, it was a game. If you want to play it, play it. I don't really give.
It was a great game. Again, it was also a good game. So it's like, but either way, and there also was a lot of great representation of a lot of I felt like it was even more hilarious because it kind of like spat in J.K. Rowling's face a little bit in terms of there being representation of like trans and other people in the game. It was hilarious.
Yeah, well,
it was like, dude, that's great. That's hilarious.
It's okay. She's retroactively not racist, Adam, so it's okay.
That's good. Nice for her. At least she didn't have the twofer, right?
She definitely does. She's pretending like she doesn't.
Well, you know what? Okay, well, I guess we take that tick off her bingo card now, right?
What we're saying is don't play D&D with J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
Because she'll bring a lot of horrible things into your game.
Yeah. Probably
and then,
not
and then gaslight you into thinking that she never did.
Yeah, probably not for any real purpose is another thing. Like that's the thing. There's no real purpose there. So point being is
well, I'll give some context. So most spellcasters, you pick your spells every level. Some of them you get more spells, some of them you get less. Wizard's a good example where you can add extra spells and you prepare a certain amount, but for what? Bard, sorcerer, warlock, ranger,
paladin.
I thought does paladin prepare?
I don't think they do.
Let me double check.
I don't
and
know
artificer.
Artificers can prepare, I believe. I don't think paladins can.
I need to check. I need to know. But the reality is that
I can check it real quick because I don't think paladins.
Paladins prepare.
Oh, do they? Okay, cool.
I need to check Artificer because I don't think Artificer actually prepares. I think they just pick.
I'm pretty sure the Artificer prepares too. I thought, because
I don't think so. No, they
okay.
don't. Oh wait. Oh. No, they prepare.
Yeah,
so
I was gonna say, yeah, they prepare too.
Sorry. The classes we're talking about here are specifically sorcerer, ranger, bard,
Yeah,
and warlock. Every time you level up, you just pick 2 spells. Now, the reason we're kind of arguing of like, well, what about these other ones?
Not
is because
that's actually not even true for them. Like, some of them don't even get 2 spells that they get when they level up.
Most of them do.
No, just wizard. Wizard is the one where you get 2 spells when you level up. Whereas with
or
like, I think
they get like another spell, or
like warlocks have to like switch out spells. Like, I think they get like a spell every level, but then they have to switch one out too, potentially.
Yeah, so some of them, like sorcerer gets
sorcerer
one spell every level.
That you can change. Spell. You can change a spell every level.
They get a new spell. Yeah, except later levels, you get to change them out. But the reality is usually it'll be a slow addition of spells.
Yeah.
And as you level up, you'll have access to better spells because you have more spell slots at a higher level. Yeah. With wizard they get to pick more spells and they can get them from other sources.
But they can learn certain spells.
But for cleric, artificer, druid and paladin, they have their whole spell list available.
They have access to all of them right away.
What that means is you still only get to prepare a certain amount, but every day after a long rest, you can choose what spells to bring. And it's daunting because you have an entire list of spells at your disposal. And now with the additional spell lists, the additional spells that they've added to the game, the list just keeps getting longer. And so it can be a little daunting. Now, as a new player, it might be easier to just play, well, I don't want to say play sorcerer, but just, play a class where you just pick a spell, like that's your new spell. Yay. Because at least you're doing the same thing over and over again. You're getting used to what you can do. But it's kind of boring sometimes if you don't pick the right spells or if you hate the spell you pick.
That's again, to your friend's point, yes. Like if you have a game where it's just like, oh, you chose this spell because you thought it'd be really cool, and it just ends up not being applicable in any situation that you come across. Like that is not an uncommon occurrence, unfortunately, especially for new players, primarily for new players. I would just ask your GM to be like, hey, can I switch this spell out for something? Like,
yeah, I hate it. I don't use it.
There should not ever be a reason why your GM should restrict that or say no to that, really. Like, unless they're just kind of being an over-controlling jerk. It's like there's no reason because you're not using it. It's not like you like. Yeah, and I think if you're new on top of that. It's like, come on, just.
I do think like if you're playing and you've played before and you use the spell and it's good, but then all of a sudden it stops being as useful and you're like, I don't want this anymore. That's not.
It's just collecting dust.
I'd say that if say you're playing as a sorcerer and you pick a couple spells and one of them's like very useful at the beginning. Whatever it does, whether it's damage or utility, it is very helpful. You use it all the time. Then a couple levels later, you haven't switched it out and it stops being as effective because you've changed where your campaign is located. You as a player, you've used this spell to great success. Yeah. Wait till a level up to change it. Your DM shouldn't have to let you just change it because it was useful to you.
It was.
You just no longer...
You utilized it to its fullest extent at that time.
Yeah, and if it's not useful anymore... Then when you level up, switch it. You're allowed to switch your spell.
I think a great example of that would probably be like Featherfall, right?
Featherfall
at early levels is probably great. Is great for like, because you don't have access to a lot of flying items or spells at that time. And if you end up falling or jumping from great heights, it's amazing. It could even technically still be super applicable in higher later levels too, to be fair. However, it is still a spell. It's like it could very well and easily be that kind of thing where you're like, oh well, once the party has access to a lot of more flying stuff, it's like you don't use it that much anymore.
Which is why
no longer really effective.
Which is why spellcasters have the opportunity at every level to switch out a spell. Use that. Look at your list. What haven't I used? What am I not going to use? Because as a beginning player, it's going to be difficult. You're going to have a lot of things, a lot of reading.
That's going to be even with the simplest spellcaster, like again, which is the sorcerer, like this, like that. the irony and hilarity is the
even like
sorcerer.
I would say warlock is pretty straightforward as well.
Warlock is
you have less
straightforward.
options.
You have less options, at least in a given situation, but you also can use those options like arguably more, because if you just do short rest, then you can just do that stuff. And then on top of that, you have Eldritch Invocations, which you can just do constantly, and some of which like aren't even spells, but they do specific things like to spells that you have, and like they add additional effects, or give you other things that you can do constantly in regards to that. But it's all because it's also just like, because also with warlocks, a lot of the time you have access to more armor, better armor, weaponry proficiencies, all that stuff that sorcerers don't have.
Yeah.
And so it's like, honestly, the the best spellcaster probably for beginners would probably be sorcerers in terms of spellcasting. Like in terms of learning how and getting used to like every other spellcaster, sorcerers would probably be the best introduction to spellcasting for people.
Yeah.
Even though they're gonna suck so much more than every other spellcaster that you're gonna have in your party.
They can still be viable.
Specifically because, I mean, sort of. Specifically because for how limited they are. They offer the least amount of spells. Again, you don't learn a new spell every time you level up. You can
until a certain point.
Well,
until like 12th level.
It takes a couple of levels because you have to like you can switch it out. So it's like for spells of first level or higher, 2 first level spells of your choice from the sorcerer spell list. Additionally, when you gain a level in this class, you can choose one of the sorcerer spells and replace it with another spell from the sorcerer spell list, which must also be of a level for which you have spell slots.
Yeah,
so you can
just looking at the sorcerer table.
Yeah,
you gain one spell every level until level 11 to 12, where you keep 12, right. And then 13 to 14 you keep 13. So you still get another spell. It's just less.
You're right. You get one extra spell basically almost every level
until level 11.
Until like level 11, where it begins to kind of drop off there at some point. Because obviously then you're getting into higher, more crazy spells, and you're only, unless you take certain spell subclasses, you're only going to have a maximum of 20 spells. That you have, and you
not even 20. It's 17 spells.
No, you're right.
Or no, 15. Sorry.
Yeah, 15 spells overall.
That's it.
So you will have again far less to choose from, and it'll be very just straight up, and even the sorcerer spell list is much less than most of the other spell casting classes at that, and it'll be easier for you to kind of just basically choose what you got, what you do. You can't change them out. So that's one thing that is good and bad, which again is just like what you see is what you got. What you got
beginner
is what
friendly.
Even though again, if you go this route, just be aware that if there are other spellcasters in the party, you're probably just not going to be as good as them. Like that's
I mean, you're definitely like the blaster.
Unfortunate truth. You can be.
You are the offensive.
I would argue though, if you have a warlock or a wizard in the party, hell, even a cleric could technically
depending on the cleric.
Yeah, it could be better than you at that. But still, you can still, it's not like you couldn't have fun. It's like, because again, to be fair, you're gonna be a great face. Like you'll be great at role play probably because you have a high charisma. And so even if you don't have proficiency in some of that, you'll still be able to role play. So like sorcerers are great beginner class for that reason, about being like, hey, if you want to learn how to like utilize and how to do the spell casting thing, they're great for that because they can introduce you to it in a much more, I think, swallowable kind of fashion, as well as, hey, it gives you easy ability to just learn how to role play and then be good at it, and then you feel good at that because you did good, right? You rolled, you got a high number, it affected things, and so like maybe that makes you feel a little bit more confident, which can bring you out of your shell to do that. You're just not going to be great mechanically speaking.
No, it's not great. But that'll be it. It's fine. When we do our debate about sorcerers, I'm going to be on the pro sorcerer side just to piss you off. I want to touch on something that I've heard, and like we've talked about this, is like having a melee class or a martial class as your beginner class. Yeah. Now I think this was a lot more applicable when 5e was first released. I think it's gotten a little bit more
it's gotten a little bit more complex at this point
because of the different subclasses you can take.
New subclasses have vastly bolstered and changed that landscape a lot, in my opinion.
There was something that I never thought would be a beginner friendly class. Like, I never thought it would ever become one. I think baseline rogue is actually an extremely beginner friendly class.
Oh, absolutely. No.
Which when I first played the game, it wasn't comparative to like fighter and stuff like that.
Well,
the reason, like, because you can boil down the rogue to 3 things. It's cunning action, sneak attack, and your dodging capabilities. Those are the 3 things.
Your dex, yeah.
And that's not specifically just that, but evasion and uncanny dodge.
True.
So you now have a character baseline that is good at sneaking most of the time. You can lockpick things, you can steal stuff. Those are all abilities that you are innately pretty good at. And then the other things you have are you attack less than everyone, so not as many dice to deal with per attack or like per turn necessarily.
Depends on
the baseline mechanic for rogue is get advantage on your attack or attack somebody that's next to your friend, so you get sneak attack, which gives you an extra set of dice depending on your level.
Gives you a lot it is get a lot of dice at later levels. So
you look at some of
especially
these,
if you crit.
That's true, but for realistically, rogue is one of those things that you want to get sneak. Your main goal is to get sneak attack and hit people, but your secondary skills are all basically like, if you get hit with something, I have a chance of not taking the damage or taking less damage.
Yeah, just
so for someone who's new to the game, giving them an opportunity to maybe fix one of their mistakes retroactively, I think is something to be said.
I'm saying. I feel like rogue has always been a great starting, exactly because for the same reason we just said for the sorcerer, it's just much more simple and straightforward. They don't have, like, especially at the beginning, like, again, they don't even their beginning classes, assassin, arcane trickster, and thief, they didn't have a lot of more specific or like complex stuff that they did. It was very straightforward and simple, where it was just like, like you said, your thing is you just are really good at stealthing, picking locks, getting into places, and then you get that one really big hit and then you get away. You just run away. You just disengage as a bonus action or whatever. You don't have to attack twice. Your weapon isn't even necessarily as big of a deal or applicable, because your sneak attack just does, especially at higher levels, so much more dice than any other weapon you would have anyway. So even if you have a dagger, it's still like, oh, I'm a level 8 rogue, I have a dagger, so I'm gonna deal like freaking I'm gonna deal 46 extra damage anyway. Like, with sneak attack, especially with now, like, there are just so many ways to get sneak attack nowadays as well.
Yeah.
And even back then, as long as you had another friend within that range, you would get it then. And so it wasn't super difficult at that time either.
But it is a class that if you do not use the abilities that it is not very effective.
No, it's true.
And so it's something that you have to like actually pay attention.
I would even say, again, because it's a skill monkey class, that also is like, that might even be like, because rogue gets a bad rap for being like, the edgelord class where people just screw with people because they're a skill monkey class. Because you can just basically be like, again, oh, I roll this, I have proficiency and expertise in it, so it's a +10. I rolled a 30, or I rolled like, a 26 or whatever, so I can just do what I want, right? It's that same thing that, like, both bard and rogue have that infamy for being, and also I think barbarian to a little less of an extent too now, or maybe more so recently, is that they have a bad infamy for attracting kind of trollish players, especially newer players, where they can be like, I can just do whatever I want because I rolled really well, or I can just do whatever I want. No, that's not how it works. That's not how it should work, and you should not play that way. But rogue is absolutely, in my opinion, has always been a great pick for a beginner because it is kind of easy street in a lot of ways. Like, you don't have to plan or do a lot of stuff. To be fair, once again, if you have a spellcaster in your class, you might feel a little simple, or even like a fighter who can attack like 4 or 5 times, or a monk who can attack 4 or 5 times, because what you do is just so much more simple. It's a lot less complex. It takes a lot less steps. You deal like a lot of damage, but it's just literally like, hey, I roll once, and if I get the attack, I roll all this dice and that's it. Whereas like, you have a fighter who's like, ooh, I'm gonna get this really cool sword that can deal this extra damage, and I'm gonna attack them like multiple times. Ooh, maybe I missed one of those attacks, or and then I'm gonna action surge, and then I'm gonna second wind to heal myself, and then I'm gonna like do these cool battle maneuvers if I have that subclass or whatever. Where it's just like, rogues are just like, yeah, I poked the guy really good, and then I ran away really good, and then I did it again next turn. So there is a little less, in my opinion, versatility, and it has much more to do with your flavor and how you portray your rogue. Because again, Skill Monkey, I feel like these guys have much more versatility and application, not necessarily in combat, but in role play and exploration, which is great. We can go ahead, since we're doing it, like we might as well just talk about, I think my biggest pick for beginner class for anybody would probably just be the Barbarian, though, personally. Like Barbarian is just like, I feel like the go-to quintessential beginner class where you're going to deal a lot of damage. You're going to take basically none, really, for the vast majority. You have the highest hit dice in the game. You don't need armor, really. Like, if you just get your con and your dex up decently, like, you're not really going to be wearing armor much. You don't need to worry about that. You get yourself just, like, a really cool weapon, and you're basically good. Like, that's about it. Because it is just a simple, like, and again, because the mechanics of it are so much simple and straightforward for the most part, and again, that has, like, to your point, that has changed a lot with all of the new subclasses that have come out, over the years, where things are just much more kind of nuanced. You get kind of stuff, but like, even like, obviously, I believe we literally said this in our classes episodes, excuse me, just D&D 5th edition classes. The Bear Totem Barbarian is the quintessential, like, easy mode of the game, most likely, where it's just like you are just, you have the most health, and you're going to take the least damage of anybody ever. It just doesn't matter. And you're going to deal a ton of buko damage too. And it also provides you with a bit of flavor and versatility in that you get some spells. You get Beast Sense, and you get Speak with Animals. Beast Sense kind of sucks, but Speak with Animals is phenomenal and great. And then on top of that, at later levels, you get like Commune with Nature and some other stuff. You get, like, again, some special stuff for your totem. Like, once you take the bear totem, you can get some other cool. You can fly at higher levels for a time. Like,
yeah, there's options.
It's a fantastic. And again, Barbarian. The only thing I will say, Barbarians they don't get nearly, in my opinion, nearly as many skills proficiencies as they should. I think we also talked about that on our Barbarian segment and multi, or not that. God damn it, not multi-class, just classes part 2. We kind of talked about that, where it's just like they don't get nearly as many skills as they probably should, even though I get it. They're supposed to be, savage, less learned, less, whatever, but they should still be really good at, like, survival and exactly because they have I think a more limited selection of skills. I feel like they should just be good at those skills, like survival, nature, athletics, perception, maybe even insight, animal handling.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, they have a lot of like survival stuff.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like they should get at least, like, they should get 4, because they get less options to choose from, but they can choose 4 because they're just they do that all the time. And so yeah, that would be my recommendation for, like, the best buko. I mean, even, like, again, in a campaign we're playing with some of my good friends, like, one woman who was playing with us, like, she had never played before, and we recommended, she was like, yeah, go bear totem. Or, although no, to be fair, she started Barbarian, but she started with wild magic, actually. And I think I talked a bit about it before, with, like, she was playing for a bit, and it didn't really work out. She wasn't really having as much fun with it after a while, and so she got the opportunity to change her subclass to Bear Totem, which is what she did. Because yeah, it just provides you with all the best things in the game without giving you too much risk or overwhelming you too much. It spoon feeds you a lot of the best aspects of the game, which is just really great. And it's just a fun class. Even, it's a fun class to play.
It's one of my favorites. So
yeah, it's one of everyone's favorite for a reason, because it gives you great amounts of versatility, but still making you just a force to be reckoned with. What would be one of yours that you would recommend as like a go-to beginner class?
I personally, this might be a surprising pick for me. I actually really think that. Where is it? Why am I not seeing this? My page is all messed up. Give me one sec. I actually think Ranger might be a fun one. It's a little difficult depending. So the only thing with
I
Ranger,
would say it's like with the spell casting aspect might be a little.
but it's so limited.
It is, but I mean, if you had like, it's just one extra thing on top of like the stuff you have, especially with like the whole choosing, like, your favorite enemy, your terrain, like remembering all of that. Like, I don't want to interrupt you. I'm just saying, like,
no,
that's explain your reasoning, because I feel like I disagree at the moment.
Yeah. So for me, I think the concept of what a ranger is, for people who play D&D for a long time, they will take the class and twist it a little. So when I make a ranger, it's not a stereotypical woodland fighter guy, a hunter, whatever you want to call it. You can change that to fit a lot of different areas, whether that's big cities, whether it's being a bounty hunter, whether, stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
I think for someone who's never played D&D, who wants to play a very easy fantasy trope that they can make their own, I think Ranger gives a good baseline for that, especially now that they've updated it and given it more options. Because at the end of the day, half of their abilities that you quote unquote aren't going to remember are more beneficial to your party, not necessarily just to you. And none of them are that complicated, in my opinion. The favorite enemy, natural explorer, which you can now replace with the optional features, but they're not overly complicated. You get things like certain terrain doesn't slow you down. You can't become lost. You get advantage on survival checks. So these are all things that, like, if I explain this to a player of like, they read this and they're like, I'm confused. They'll be like, okay, well, your character is so well versed in traveling in these specific terrains that these are things you're just going to be able to do. And if I take the way that they've written this down and just kind of flip it to like, this is what you know how to do, it's so much easier to understand. I think it's just a poorly written example of a class. It's not actually very complicated. I think it's just poorly explained.
I mean, it's just, I wouldn't say it's, I don't know if the difficulty comes in its mechanics overall, like you just said. Like, I would agree. I absolutely feel like, a lot of it is rather poorly worded, as well as it's and due to that poor wording, I feel like a lot of it, like, it comes across as being just incredibly situational in a lot of ways. And that's like, again, that's one, I think, another of the biggest risks personally about Ranger, especially starting out, is that like, you run the risk of like not really being able to use a lot of this stuff in its current form. So unless you work with your GM to kind of homebrew certain things, like you said, it has, especially homebrew for new play. Well, not homebrew, but tweak, which is technically homebrew. But it's,
okay, so I'll put it this way. In this situation, I think all of these like new players, I am hoping that both the other people at the table who have played before and the GM who hopefully has played before is helping them make some of these, or like giving them the information they need to make some of these decisions.
Agreed.
The thing that Ranger has is the favorite terrain. And if you pick one that is not applicable in an entire campaign, you're going to have a rough time. Now, as a GM, if you see someone pick Ranger, and then you know that this is going to be an Underdark campaign, and they pick Forest, talk to them.
Or Tundra, whatever.
Tundra. And the reality is, let's see, how many...
Well, that's another thing, right? Is that they might not be as... I do know there are some tables that are like, they're not as communicative with their players about making it in terms of like... Because, like, for instance, another thing being is favored enemy. Although, again, I think they addressed this. That, replace it now. But especially, like, back in the day, it was like favorite enemy is like, unless the player themselves talked to the GM and was like, hey, what enemies are we going to be kind of fighting in this campaign? And the GM might even also not be wanting to share that, and maybe they don't even know right away off the top of their
You
head.
know what? I figured it out. Just replace the 2 original ones with the new ones, and it's an easier class to understand, and it works just as well.
100%.
So
they did that for a reason.
And I think it turns a class that maybe some people are like, I don't get it. I don't like, how is this useful? The new abilities and the way that it's presented, with even some of the older subclasses, Hunter is still completely viable because of the new optional class features.
I love Hunter.
And again, it is a well-known, established, I can look at it and be like, I understand what this is going to do. I know what kind of character I'm going to have. Yes, there are spells. I don't think any of them are particularly difficult. Even with the expanded spell list, they're not. A lot of them are pretty straightforward, and they all do very similar things. So I think
a lot of them are like concentration, so it's like you only use one of them at a time anyway.
For me, Ranger gives you a good mix of just regular martial fighting, which we will learn how to do. Spell casting, which can be a little bit daunting, but I think Ranger, the amount of spells you get, the fact that you're picking spells, so you're very limited, similar to Sorcerer. There's not a whole lot you get to choose from, so it's easy to understand. And then ability usage. Rangers do have a fair amount of different things that they can use both in and outside combat, besides just shooting things or stabbing things. And so I think it's a good all-around, like, learn how to use some abilities, learn what those abilities do when I fight people. I have a couple spells at my disposal. Like, it gives you kind of a little bit of everything that I feel like if you're someone who's played RPGs, if you're someone who will take a little bit of time to read what your spells do and ask questions, I think it's a good class for that, because it gives you a little bit of everything that you can kind of get your head around it, realize, oh, that's how this works. And then your next character, you can go off in whatever direction you liked the most. Whether it's more utility, you go into Bard and Rogue. Whether it's spell casting, you go straight into Wizard. Or it's Martial and you go to... It's kind of, to me, it dips into everything, but not enough to be scary. That's my opinion. I understand. What you said is right. You're not wrong.
Is valid.
But 100% valid. But for me, pretty much everything
I absolutely agree with that too. I agree with you what you just said too. Like I absolutely feel like, again, your logic there is spot on in terms of, like, I feel like, and ironically, that also might in essence be one of the reasons why Ranger is considered, at least mechanically, to be one of the least viable, like,
not so much now, but definitely when it was first released.
I mean, even now, in certain senses, just in its baseline abilities and such as a class, and subclasses are now making up for that a lot more now. But it's even the baseline ability, and even they specifically rewrote a number of them to make it. But even still, a lot of it is still in regards to other classes considered to be mechanically far less effective or viable, exactly because they dip into so many other things without doing that stuff nearly necessarily as well or to the same extent as other classes. And so it's both a strength and a weakness. But honestly, maybe the moral of it is here, ladies and gentlemen, is the best classes, probably for beginners, are the least viable and effective ones overall.
Aside from Barbarian.
Yeah, except, Barbarian is still so super viable and effective because of its longevity and its survivability.
Yeah.
Like, that alone is the best of any class in the game.
I'll make the argument, Adam, that if you pay enough attention, you can still build viable characters out of these classes.
100%.
Especially if your party likes to call you a power gamer.
But not for new players, Sam. That's the point. We're talking about beginners and new players.
But I can.
You can make almost any class.
But I can teach you how to abuse.
We're gonna make a seminar. We're gonna do like a seminar where we have to teach people how to make toxic
overpowered rangers.
Toxic overpowered sorcerers and rangers. We're gonna teach you guys how to make toxic overpowered viable sorcerers.
We're talking melee sorcerers. We're talking rangers with swords instead of bows. That's what we're going full melee this time. Turn every class that isn't melee, and it'll be good in close combat. But I think like, obviously we'll nod at the champion fighter.
Champion fighter.
If you want,
it's the classic of the classic, bro.
Just for context to those who hopefully those of you who are new and do not understand what why we are saying this with a grin on our face. Fighter is, it's the fighter. They hit things. They have more subclasses now that are spell adjacent.
It couldn't be more just accurate. Like the fighter, he fights, man. They fight.
Here's the headstone text for champion fighter. The archetypal champion focuses on the development of raw physical power honed to deadly perfection. Those who model themselves on this archetype combine rigorous training with physical excellence to deal devastating blows. Now, there is another fighter that I think most people would pick when looking at the original 3 fighting classes, and that's Battlemaster, because it gives you maneuvers. You can do cool things with your weapon.
Some flashy stuff. It's flashy, like,
and it's also its utility. It's things like tripping people. It's things like distracting people, goading people to attack you, and then adding your AC. Like, it's good stuff like that. Now, Champion takes the whole other route, which is I hit. So your first ability is improved critical, which you will notice that's something you can get with Hexblade Warlock as well. But improved critical allows you, when you hit 3rd level, this is the only thing you get from this class at 3rd level, you crit on a 19 or a 20. So you now have a 10% chance, or 10, was it 10 out of 100?
Yeah, I believe so.
Or something, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Either way, you now have a 10% chance instead of a 5% chance to crit. Now, cool. That's awesome. We like that. It does what it says on the tin.
It's not nothing, you know.
Let's look at, you know, but you don't have to do anything. This is just I attack. I have a higher chance to crit, theoretically. Just go, if you want to play a champion fighter, go to the game store, find a die that's weighted to 19 instead of 20.
Literally. Just do that.
Because then they can't accuse you of cheating. Your second ability is Remarkable Athlete, which gives you half your proficiency bonus rounded up to any strength, dexterity, or con check that doesn't already use your proficiency bonus. In addition, you can increase your running long jump distance. So here's my problem. The dexterity Remarkable Athlete check and the constitution check maybe are pretty applicable. But strength only has one ability tied to it when you're making strength checks, and you are already going to be proficient in that because it's athletics.
There's no reason not to be. Like, there's no reason for you not to take athletics.
Here's the deal. It does have the option, you get a second fighting style, which is kind of nice.
That's you get 10th level though.
Yeah, and then you get at 15th level, you get superior critical, which is 18, 19, or 20.
That's nice.
Now, you know? Again, as we've said, this class is ostensibly the most bare bones fighter can get, because all it does is make you hit more. Not
even hit more. Not even hit more. You slightly maybe hit harder.
Well, you will hit more if you're fighting things that have a really high AC, because crit automatically hits.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you're probably not gonna necessarily be fighting anything where you can only crit to hit them. Like if you roll an 18
all the time.
No.
All the time.
And maybe some of the campaigns I've played in, like the epic level stuff, maybe. But you're not gonna be doing that in most campaigns, and therefore this unfortunately does not really do it. It's almost a non-subclass in a lot of ways.
If you're super nervous and super new and you don't want to have to read anything,
this is the one to
play a champion fighter.
Like Sam just said, this is the literal bare bones class character. This it does nothing. But
you don't make any extra choices. Nope. There's no paragraphs you have to read.
Not that you wouldn't already be doing. You know,
every one of your abilities is like a sentence at most.
Yeah.
So if you want a really short features list on your character sheet,
champion fighter is the way to go. You don't got to think about. You got to worry about any other additional effects, rolls. Like your DC, you don't got a DC. What is DC to you? It means nothing.
DC is what you have to roll against when an enemy
that does something to you. It doesn't mean nothing to you otherwise. Like, you know, you just
but that's boring, and I don't like telling people to play champion fighter because it's boring.
No, it is.
The only time you should have a champion fighter is if you multi-class into it for the improved critical feature.
Yeah, that's the irony of this class is it is. In its simplicity, it's probably one of the worst, in my opinion, to offer or to suggest for beginners, because it doesn't give them any real idea of what the game is really about and what you can do. Like that is the, like, I'm like, I couldn't in good conscience like recommend this for anybody who's starting out, because I'm just like, this doesn't tell you anything. This doesn't provide you with anything of the cool stuff you can do in this game and all the amazing. This literally restricts your imagination to such a grand extent. Like, you are at the absolute whims of your GM to give you like some magic items or something, like some feat, some free feats or whatever.
What you need, like, you would need another character, like another person at your table to play artificer and outfit you.
Yeah.
And then take feats if you roll well on your stats, so you can have things like Great Weapon Master and mobile and things like that to make the character into something that's genuinely terrifying. But that's like, only because you're being augmented by two other things.
This is the biggest representation of the example of just like, you're just like, oh, I rolled. Did I do anything? Like,
it's Brain Dead Fighter.
And you're just like, you know what?
Hey, look, some people like Brain Dead Fighter.
I didn't get a 19 or 20.
If you're gonna play Brain Dead Fighter, just play Battle Master, play Samurai.
Do Battle Master, Brain Dead Fighter, Battle Master, Samurai is great. Gunslinger is probably a great one too.
If your table likes critical role stuff.
Yeah.
Don't play Purple Dragon Knight. We don't have to talk about this. It's nobody plays it. You shouldn't play it.
I mean, my friend played it.
One day I'm gonna play it as a joke, and I'm gonna see how far that character can go in terms of viability.
My friend, we got all the way up to level 20 with it from level 3. So I mean, to be fair, he died the most out of everybody. But we brought him back.
It's just so good at him. Yeah, when I look at all the abilities, it's just so good. But I think as a beginner, when you're looking at these classes and you're looking at things, and you're like, think of an idea, right? Go to your DM. Think of an idea of what you want your character to be. Go to your DM. Be like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you suggest?
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's what I was saying at the beginning. Like, what I always do: ask your players, GMs, and players to like ask your GMs to be like, hey, what are you looking to do? What do you want your character to kind of do? Like, what are you trying to make your character like? Just take an archetype again, and that's where we like, we take it, Legolas, Gimli, Aragorn, like all like it's like just pick something that you think is cool and that you would enjoy, and then we can GMs, and you can present to them like, okay, this is probably what would be most applicable and based off of our experience, what can happen, what will happen, like, and then try to meet somewhere in between with that, find the balance in that there. And that is, in my opinion, the best introduction, where it's like, hey, this is the idea that you had. If it falls within all, if you like as a beginner have done like a lot of reading and a lot of like analysis, a lot of research before playing, that's great, that's awesome. And I would be much more willing to probably be like, yeah, okay, like show me what you got and we'll see kind of like what's up. But for anybody who like, is brand new, maybe doesn't have a lot of information or research and such, like, yeah, it is imperative to talk and work with because again, even like I know people like, I think a lot of people want to start with like bard class, for instance. Like a lot of people love the idea of playing like as a bard because they are the sexy, artistic performance, and with that magic to boot on top of all of that. And in some cases, sure, like, in some cases, again, in regards to their skill monkey abilities, yeah, you know what I mean? They would be another great one to have, because you'll just succeed if you're looking to try to like get a little bit more comfortable with role play. These guys are great for that way of being able to present you with the opportunity to come out of your shell. They're not the best in regards to trying to figure out mechanic stuff with them, because they're much harder and much more harder to like make viable mechanically in terms of like survival and
what do you mean?
Stuff.
What are you trying to insinuate here?
They are not the best. Again, they are only slightly above sorcerers in regards to the spells that they can utilize at any given time. Their spell list is at lower levels not as
Oh.
great. They're depending on the subclass you choose, they're not necessarily as
No, they have extremely benefited from the optional spells,
They
the
have.
added spells.
They have exponentially
Now
so.
I will say that I think they are extremely survivable because I survived in Schult. So
Well, you survived in Schult with I'm sure a multitude of other people in your party that helped to carry your ass.
No, I was a very important, effective member of my team.
Yeah. What about combat? In combat? Yeah.
I saved a lot of people's lives, Adam.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, from a healing word and
not just healing word, my cool ability where I got them all to move when I
yeah,
inspired.
you can move them out of harm's way for sure. How many people did you kill, Sam? How many people and how often were you up in that range? Like how far back were you in any given melee at any given point?
What's max range in a short bow? 80 feet?
Yeah, something like that. Around there.
I was about 100 feet away.
Yeah. At all times.
I was
any conflict or
I was definitely for some reason, most of the time I ended up in the middle.
Wow.
And what would happen is I would just use dissonant whispers on everyone.
Yeah.
But the reality is Bard is not an offensive spellcaster. It is a utility based.
It's all utility support. Like
it's support. So if you are the kind of person that likes to play support or healer in other video games, and you look at cleric and you're like,
and maybe this is
too structured for me.
Yeah,
you want to get weird? You want to get weird? Come over here. We got bards. All right, get weird. I love it. Yeah, you want to play music to undead ghosts that sit around campfires with you? Spirits Bard. Let's have some fun. Here's the deal. Bards are cool because it doesn't have to be music. It can be any kind of expression.
Yeah, no, it can be any artistic expression that you feel is applicable.
On my Monday game that we just started playing, the Dragon Heist, I have a bard that his art is gambling. He's a gambling man.
Gonna have a big old like crap fuzzy dice that you just like use.
I like the ideas of I like the idea of when every time I inspire someone or do a spell, I draw cards out of a deck. So like I'll draw like a blackjack hand. Yeah, and if I draw a good blackjack hand, you get inspired, like that kind of thing of like I'll draw, it's bad, it doesn't, I'm like, god, you put the right thing down and they get it.
I like that.
That was my
almost
idea.
Like Gambit-esque kind of like character, like Gambit, shooting up like
he's not actually using the cards as weapons. It's
but
solely
it's still like just like
yeah,
but it's the performative aspect to it.
The reality is that it's an artistically expressive class, whatever art you choose, and it's a supporting class with a lot of abilities that both augment other people's successes and your own,
depending on what subclass you take. Yeah,
I would say pretty much all of them, even just based on Bard itself. Because you have the ability to affect other people, you are automatically supported.
It's usually, I just say it's usually more external rather than internal. Like it's usually more affect the things around you and the people around you rather than yourself being more affected.
Yeah,
like
obviously there are, Whispers Bard and other ones that are a little bit more
bit more of a personal effect.
You can affect yourself a little bit more, but they are the battlefield inspiring. They don't fight a lot. They're not good in close combat. They're not good at far combat.
I also just want to throw out there for honorable mention, counter charm.
We don't talk about counter charm. Adam, I thought we agreed on this beforehand that we don't talk about counter charm.
I'm sorry. Did we? I can't quite recall that.
I sent you. I'm pretty sure I wrote it in today's business meeting plan.
In our contract.
I wrote it in the margin.
I can't seem to recall. I feel like
next to the I had
there was a lot redacted from a lot of the
It was a paper, and at the end of the paper it said, "I will not talk about counter charm," and you signed your name, so I don't understand.
Did I sign my name, Sammy? I think I signed Daffy Duck or something. And again, a lot of this was redacted.
Adam, I think you're forgetting I can't read cursive, so I don't know what you wrote.
Fair enough. All right.
Let's. You know what? For the fact of new people who found my introduction of bards is and come over here, let's get weird. Counter charm is an ability that is widely. I would say it's a unfortunate ability that wasn't written correctly, and a lot of tables, I think, have started to change it. I don't know exactly how I would change it necessarily. I mean, maybe making it a bonus
kind of a hard
action.
one. It's kind of a hard one. Like
It's hard.
It's just so situational for one, and it's just like I think for sure a bonus action, or maybe even making it a reaction, because it literally has counter in the name. If it's make it like counter spell, like make it a reaction, and don't have it take like so
a full turn
long.
I think a way to do this is either make it. Let's read the ability just for the sake of it.
All right.
At 6th level, you gain the ability to use musical notes or words of power to disrupt mind-influencing effects. As an action, you can start a performance that lasts until the end of your next turn. During that time, you and any friendly creatures within 30 feet of you have advantage on saving throws against being frightened or charmed. A creature must be able to hear you to gain this benefit. The performance ends early if you are incapacitated or silenced, or if you voluntarily end it. Now, the problem with this is it takes 2 whole turns.
And it's an action.
Well, I think technically the second turn, are you allowed to act as normal? I think so, right?
Again,
I believe so.
This is where some of the contention there lies, because it's literally a lot of people might make the argument that it's like, hey, you are doing a performance. You are, so it lasts until the end of your next turn. Therefore, you start at this turn, and at the beginning, you're still going and doing a performance. Yeah. And so therefore, you might not really be able to do anything else until the end of that next turn, because you are performing. Like,
where this becomes an issue is action economy in the game, and also the fact that to know that you're going to have to use counter charm before an enemy does something to you, you are mitigating.
It doesn't help you break effects. No,
it kind of does, because it gives you advantage, but like the reality,
but not if
they're already frightened, it gives you advantage to get out of it.
Yeah, to get out of it. If you're charmed and you attack them, then maybe they can try to get out of it anytime. But it's like
it's a difficult one, because it's not. Because you're sacrificing so much of your own thing to maybe give someone a benefit,
and it doesn't just advantage.
It doesn't work.
It's not even like a bonus, like a flat bonus, like you roll for it yourself. Like, you should just make it like counterspell. Be like, hey, as a reaction, I can either stop this thing from happening, or I can even try to break it. A person of their frightened or charmed by I think rolling this thing to give them inspiration, or to move them emotionally in some way to shatter the control on them. It's not good.
They won't do that though.
No, they won't.
The reality is that you can tweak this. I think making it a bonus action is fine, so that you still get your actions.
But that's the problem being, though, is you do a bonus action, again, by the wording of it, you're technically doing this thing that just takes
take it out. Just take it off. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say make it a reaction counter thing.
The reality is, I think because it has unlimited uses, so I think what it still does, where it would give you advantage on saving throws, I think maybe when your party gets hit by something that frightens everyone, you as a reaction can go, well, I counter charm that, so everyone has advantage on their save.
Yep.
I think that is an okay use of this. It's not overpowered.
And then to basically be like, it doesn't last until the end of your next turn or whatever.
It's just instance. If they fail, they fail.
Yeah.
But
and it's just a reaction being like, hey, I can help,
maybe.
I can help.
I think it's better in that case. The reality is it's like the one sore spot on bards to me is their 6th level ability is dog shit.
Oh, it's absolutely horrendous. And but otherwise bards are amazing. They're great.
They're fun.
They're super fun. They're difficult in terms of survivability for a lot of them. They are not, even with depending on the subclass you take, they get one of the lowest. They get a D8 for their hit dice, which is fine. I personally would say they're probably not the best, because just a lot of their stuff is a little bit it's just very nuanced, and it's very flavorful. It's very specific.
You're telling me my heavy armor, when I took all the feats to get heavy armor, full tank valor bard isn't very good?
Probably not for beginners, Sam. No, that's probably not the best way to introduce them to the game. But it is great in terms of role play potential for you guys, as well as again, your spells aren't going to be super crazy or ridiculous. They will have a cool amount of effects, They're very flavorful in that way.
Yeah, but they have new spells and new things that they didn't have before,
their spells are augmented, which is nice, and they're I would say this would be kind of on the fence for me. Like, it's both a good and maybe not good, depending on kind of your vibe as a start, because again, just being skill monkey, having access to skills, just being good at skills is great. And then depending on what subclass you choose, like you could do like a Valor Bard, which would be great. You know what I mean? Like, Valor Bard is awesome. Honestly, I love lore bards. Lore bards are great.
Glamour's great.
Glamour's great. Whispers is great. You know, like you can do a lot of cool things. Don't take sword. You don't got to do sword.
Well, swords is fine.
Just pick Valor. Valor is just a better sword bard. Like, just do Valor.
But this one has flourish.
You can flourish. Yeah. You can flourish as a Valor bard. You know,
not really, but
you can.
Kind of.
A flourish is literally just this. You just do.
Oh, I know. I meant more like you know.
I'm aware. Mechanically, it might not.
Just take College of Whispers and steal people's souls.
College of Whispers is great. I love College of Whispers.
Or Spirits is fun, although I never played it. They're all like the reality is Bard is one of those classes that like I think there's a little bit of something for everybody there.
Yeah.
And if you fix Counter Charm, and you're okay with not being the one that does the most damage, but being helpful, I think it's a great class. You can later on take Magical Secrets, pick up Lightning Bolt, and you're going to be pretty effective against most things because most things don't have resistance to lightning damage.
Very specific things, yeah, do like obviously if you're going to like fight certain stuff in the sea or the elemental plane of water, those things might, but there are a pretty good amount of things that are not resistant to lightning. Like it's a pretty middle of the road resistance elemental type. Obviously some demons or devils do, but
they're more resistant to fire.
Well, it's fire, lightning, and ice usually for demons and devils a lot.
Well, then
because they fight so often with it.
Just go full into the psychic damage stuff.
Psychic is going to be like one of your best things.
Phantasmal Force, Phantasmal Killer.
Makes sense for bards, you know what I mean? Yeah, like it's great, honestly.
Like even just the fact that they're going to cast a lot of things like Enlarge and Reduce, Slow, Command. Things that are like battlefield changers.
Control.
Person, heat metal.
Bards are all about control. They are the control class.
And it's fun because it makes it so everybody at your table is better at what they're doing because you're basically pinning people down. And it's fun. And it's, again, they're not the most offensive based classes. You can build a fairly competent, like, off fighter bard with Valor or swords, like, or even Whispers, like where you are darting in and out of midline and still fighting people in one-on-one. That's okay. You're not going to be as good as the fighter or the rogue or the paladin or even, dare I say it, even the ranger technically.
No, you won't.
You're
not in terms of melee, but you're always going to be better than the sorcerer.
Yeah, probably. You won't. Well, sorcerers can like dish out way more damage, but
maybe, they can.
Yeah, not maybe. But either way, it's a different kind of class. It's a weird one. And also, just remember that you do not have to be horny the whole time you play Bard.
Not always. A bit of horniness never hurts nobody, but you don't gotta be horny all the time,
Yeah.
Like just yeah, you can be horny. That's okay.
Play a horny druid. If you're gonna
do a horny druid, well, maybe no.
You caught me.
I take it back. We're not doing a horny druid.
Fine. A horny monk.
A horny monk would be interesting. I mean, I've played a similar kind of thing.
A drunk, horny monk.
Yeah, exactly. Or barbarian, kind of. Just mitigate that to a certain extent.
What we mean is there are some. As a new player, you maybe aren't aware of some of the tropes that are cast upon some of these classes. Of course, for Rogue, there's a pretty straightforward one. I steal from everyone, or I secretly murder people in an alley. For Bard, it has the best one, which is I want to get down and dirty with pretty much everything. Yeah,
literally get your rocks off to anything and everything you possibly can.
Now, if you're me, you choose limited, the right
but
things.
Not limited, but not restricted to dragons being the
beholders,
magnum opus,
weird aberrations, slimes.
Yeah, bro.
Now, if you're me and you played a Bard, you decided to get down and dirty with a princess, so you never had to worry about anything else in your life. But that's again,
hey, you know what? That's honestly, it's a little bit too tame. That's a little bit tame by Bard standards, to be honest. Like, let's be frank here.
I'm a king.
Yeah. So
That's fucking awesome. Either way, the reality is like that's a trope that you're gonna have to deal with. People will make fun of you.
Yes, they will most likely bring
I've been
this
playing
up.
with the same people for 6 years, and I still get made fun of when I pick Bard. And they know I'm gonna pick it again because I love it.
Yeah, it's one of your favorite classes, bud. I mean, hey, you did so well that one time. Why would you not want to do it again? Like, I feel that same way about wizards, bro. I love wizards, man. That's my shiz.
That's how I feel about sorcerers. I did really good that one time.
No, you didn't. You died. You died at level 3, bro. No, you did not do good.
It did so good.
You died as you lived by sucking so hard. You sucked eggs, bro. You didn't even get to use the best of your like.
What, you mean my cool shadow sword?
Yeah, you didn't get to use.
It was so effective while I was being peppered by arrows.
Use like the best like traits that a shadow sorcerer could have.
I love the idea. I go up to this guard, I shoot him with a fireball, and they're like, "Get that man!" And I just turn around and I go, "Ha!" And then I just get
prepare to face the shadows of my eyes.
Yeah, and I just get peppered with arrows and I die. Now, that's a learning experience for those of you out there. Or you can follow in my footsteps and not care about character death too much because you can just make another one.
It really is pretty hilarious. Like, let's be honest, like here's the thing. You should care about your characters.
But be prepared. The first one you lose, unless you're crazy like me, it's going to hit you a little bit.
I mean, he's not even crazy. Remember, he still cannot face his druid after all this time. Okay?
No, but when the first time my character died, and this is in the same group that it was a new group. We were all together. I was the first one to die, and everyone is like freaking out, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to bring my body back, and they can't because all that's left of me is a frozen hand, and I am actively sitting at the other end of the table,
just writing up a new one
with Xanathar's guide open, making a new character, like rolling dice.
And like, again,
like, what are you doing? I'm like, nothing.
To his point, it is absolutely important to be prepared that character death can be a real thing. Now, just because your character can die doesn't necessarily mean that they will have to be gone forever. I think we've talked about this before in terms of like work with your GM, like let your GM know like, hey, are there certain like, contingencies or tools in place that like, hey, if I still have a particular connection or desire to continue this character's story and development, like, can I still potentially find a way to do that? You might have to, again, play like another character for a couple of sessions or something, maybe if your party is willing to like, go and get a healer to revive you. Mm-hmm. But, it's still something to just be aware of, like, hey, it's okay for characters to die sometimes.
Yeah, it's going to suck.
It's going to suck. It's going to hurt most likely. Like, again, unless you're a sociopath, but you can absolutely... You can absolutely find ways to continue. Exactly. Your character.
I died doing exactly what I wanted to be doing.
Yeah.
Fighting a dragon head first.
Hey, you died in glorious, honorable combat to the apex predator.
Despite what everyone told me not to do, I did it and I died. But he was a barbarian. That's what he was going to do.
Sure, you know what? Again, more power to him. Fair enough. And again, in that case, he probably wouldn't come back anyway because his soul wouldn't be willing.
Well, no, he did come back because Melora told him to.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Gotta love Melora, honestly.
Yeah.
But and yeah, there you go. See, there it is. Yeah. But that in essence, everyone, I think that's about all we kind of got for you today. Just a bit of our thoughts about beginners coming in, some tips and tricks and advice that we can offer from our own experiences and thoughts and opinions. As always, thank you guys for coming and tuning in. If you did, give us some ideas about what your original, like, how you got into the game. What was your first campaign? What were your first experiences for you guys and how you guys played and what was that like? Did it end well? Was it a bit of a horror story? Was it a glory story? Please do leave some comments down below. Let us know, like the video, subscribe if you haven't already. We appreciate all of it. It helps us a lot.
Yeah. Please leave comments about the cringiest character you've made. I need to know.
Yeah, honestly, it would be so great. We would love it so much.
I need something to get my mind off of the one that got away, which is the only nice character I've ever made. So I need something, but thank
copium.
you.
Please supply that copium for dear old Sam. We're making a GoFundMe
It's a copium GoFundMe.
Submit all of your best characters.
I'm talking handmade. I'm talking handmade fan art of your own OC.
Yeah,
I want to see
literally.
it.
They gotta be good. They gotta be good.
Preferably in crayon. I want it to be on notebook paper. Like I need to. Yeah, it's like taken with a camera.
We need that
it's on another screen,
okay?
so it's all grainy.
We need that innocence to be supplied because he is desperately needing to refill that hole that was yanked, that was created at the loss of his character. Thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you later. Jesus Christ.